What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Boots and Chutes Unfiltered. We have an amazing guest today. I've known Keith for a while, Keith Benoit, Army Aviator, prior enlisted infantry guy. He's got an awesome story, man. He's got an awesome story. I'm gonna let him talk through it. But anything from the infantry world to flying Apaches to buzzing West Point to a bunch of different things, flying in Syria, flying in Mosul on combat missions. So it's a really interesting story, and we are super excited for this one. And I'm just excited to listen to it, and I'm humbled to have Keith on the show because I've known him for a good bit now, and we've ran across paths over our career, and thinking about guests that come on. Like, our theme is we have good people on here, good human beings, and he's one of them. So thank you so much, Keith, for coming on, and I'm gonna turn this over to Chris for some opening comments.
Hey, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Thanks for pulling up a chair and having a discussion with us. Let's get into it.
Let's go. Keith, where you from, man? Tell us this.
Yeah, so Keith Benoit, originally from Worcester, Massachusetts, actually. So big Red Sox fan, as Jerry knows, big Bruins fan. Unfortunately, I guess these days, but
Yeah,
all the New England sports, as I'll talk about later, how I decided where to get promoted. I've been in the Army in one way, shape, or form for 33 years now. So I'm probably just not smart enough to retire. Eventually, I will be. So I started out in the Massachusetts Army National Guard. I was 17 years old. I had a middle class, childhood. Dad was a telephone worker. Mom worked at a bank. Nothing big, not rich by any means. Dad worked his ass off to send me to a really high priced private school for high school, and I repaid them by joining the Army. So I was 17 years old, driving home from school one day after hockey practice, and I decided to stop at a National Guard recruiter and ask them, because I didn't have any money to pay for college and I wanted to go to college. So they had a sign outside that said they'd pay for college. And so I asked him if that was for real. And he said, yeah, sure. And I walked in. After we started talking for a few minutes, I said, well, what do I have to do to sign up? And he said, well, so you got to take a test at ASVAB. And I was like, great, sounds good. When can I take it? He said, we're taking it in an hour. So I took it. I'm not good at a lot of things, but I'm really good at standardized tests. So I ended up with 130 GT, which was
nice
out at the time. And he said, well, you can do anything you want in the Army. And I said, well, what do you think? And it was an infantry unit. So he was like, well, you could join the infantry. You're only doing it on the weekends. It'll be a lot of fun. You get to go to the woods.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, sure. That sounds like a lot of fun. And I left for basic training about 3 weeks later in June of '93. And about a week into it, I realized I had made a horrible mistake, but there was no way getting out of it at that point. Yeah. So did my basic training down there, got out of there, started going to college. And after a year of college, I'd like to say I decided to leave college, but I was politely asked not to return due to failing out of college. So I did. I went to the regular Army recruiter because I was decent at it. Made E5 in about 18 months in the Guard, and decided I was going to go full time. So I started out at 3rd Brigade, 3rd Infantry up in Kelly Hill at Fort Benning, Georgia. Spent about 2.5 years there. Went to Jordan as part of Operation Eager Lion while I was there. So it was my first kind of taste. It was really just a 30-day training exercise, but it was my first overseas experience. From there, after about 2.5 years, I decided I didn't want to be in the mechanized infantry anymore. So I reenlisted to go to Fort Drum, New York, and I ended up in 187 Infantry in 1st Brigade. Absolutely loved it. Had a great platoon sergeant, Master Sergeant Mike Tompkins. He was just awesome, and really encouraged me. After watching me for a little bit, whether it was a compliment or an insult, but he told me I'd make a great officer. So I looked into what that would take, and it was the Green to Gold program. And so I applied for it, was accepted, went back home to school in Worcester, Massachusetts. So I went to what was called Worcester State College. It's Worcester State University now. And I did my ROTC at a place called Worcester Polytech Institute. I was the the former infantry guy as a history major because I like to read and I was good at that. But the school where I took ROTC was one of the premier engineering schools in the world. So I ended up with some really, really smart people around me. But I played the role of the former infantry guy that was, the history major, but I loved it. Made it out of there. I originally put aviation down as a joke when I did the advanced camp thing, which was just really like PLDC on steroids. Yep. So I was able to smoke that pretty good and got done with that and just decided, hey, I'll put aviation down. Wouldn't that be cool to put that down? Figuring they're just going to send me back to the infantry. Why wouldn't they? That would make a lot of sense. And I remember there was a major that I didn't get along with really well. He was an aviation guy. He just didn't like prior service people. He told me that prior service people should not be officers. Officers are born, not made, like all this other nonsense.
Yeah.
And, so we just didn't get along. And so what I ended up doing was putting aviation down almost to spite him. And they came in for branching day. They say, hey, you're getting your branch. And all the things were running through my head. 9/11 had just happened. So I'm like, man, like I'm going to go back to the infantry. I'm going right to Iraq. And I was fine with that. But he called me in the office and he's like, you got aviation. And I was like, oh, okay. I should probably figure out how helicopters fly then, because I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
So I ended up taking a physics class that year because I should probably figure out how helicopters fly. And when I took the physics class, it ended up being electrical physics. So that was useless. But anyway, so I went to flight school completely unprepared. Came down here I'm at Fort Rucker right now, stationed here. And but I came to Fort Rucker in 2003, October. All I wanted to be was a scout pilot. When I was at Fort Drum, we were doing a mountain peak exercise. And I just remember this OH-58 Delta came down and landed like right next to the TOC. And these two guys got out in flight suits. And I was like, man, that's pretty badass. And that's what I want to fly. And so when it came time for aircraft selection, there was only one 58 that was available. I finished number 2 in the class. Top guy wanted to be Apache, so I took the 58. So I made it through flight school here, graduated in 04, and reported to Fort Bragg. So I got to Fort Bragg, ended up in 182 Attack and then 117 Cavalry. That's really where I started in the cavalry, which I've been in. All my conventional assignments have been in cavalry unit, to include us when you and I were together in Iraq.
Yeah.
And so did my platoon leader time, came out of there. I was offered a couple of jobs. One of the jobs was like, hey, you can be the battalion S1, you can be the battalion S4, you can be the 3-5 platoon leader, or you can do this other thing. And this other thing was going to work for Major Chuck Mazuraki over in the Falcon Brigade.
There you go.
Didn't know what I was getting.
Hey, Keith, can I go back to the Kiowa? Like,
of course.
Can I get a shot out to that? Because I'm growing up as like a GWAT baby and going through like that's the aircraft, man. Besides, you got the sword, you got all that kind of stuff. The Apaches too. And it's great, but just seeing those guys low level, man, and to the ground. And one of our episodes, I had a friend of mine that flew those, and he would land and bring the boys whippets and and stuff like that. It's just such an iconic aircraft. I think every infantryman that served in that time period looks at that that aircraft and just with just admire it and respect it.
I was so pissed when they discontinued that airframe.
You and me both.
Yeah.
I it goes really, like I said, it goes back to being an infantryman and seeing that. And I'll tell you, the majority of the people when I was a platoon leader, everybody there was a warrant officer, almost to a man and woman, was either a former infantryman, a former special operator. I had a couple of former, 18 series enlisted guys that were in there. I had at least 3 former Ranger Regiment guys. And there was a reason why they chose 58s, because they all remembered the same thing you and I remembered when we were doing it. And, even on that deployment that you and I were on, although you may not be aware of it, I had a standing agreement with Colonel Davidson where I would either go out on ops with you guys or I would plan all night. I would get a couple hours of sleep, and then I would actually drive up the street to the unit that was up the street that was flying Kiowas, and I'd go fly an 8-hour day with them.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And,
jeez.
and then I would come back and sleep for a couple hours and do it all again. I aged about
Yeah.
10 years during that deployment because of that. But I was, I've got to, I can weave the story in a little bit later, but there was one where I took rounds when I was out on a flight, and we were supposed to brief General McChrystal that night on an op we were doing, for Task Force Falcon, and I was late because I had to hitch a ride from Anaconda to get back up there because my aircraft was no good anymore because it was full of bullet holes.
Yeah.
And I ended up being late for the thing, and I remember walking in and Colonel Davidson and General McChrystal, they were just waiting on me. I see McChrystal's aide there, and he's like, "Where you been?" And I was like, I promise you, I got a story." And I walked in, and General McChrystal's like, kind of looked at me, and Davidson looked at me, and I was like, "Hey, sir, you remember that surface to air fire that you just saw pop up over there?" I was like, "That was me."
Mhm.
Like, I got shot up. And he was like, "Okay." And General McChrystal just started laughing. He's like, "Well, I guess that's as good an excuse as any not to be here,
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I was doing that while we were part of Falcon. I was actually flying about 3 days a week.
That's crazy. I didn't
and that
know
was
that. That's
voluntary.
awesome.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
voluntary because they were flying so much. They were flying 8-hour aerial QRFs, just going up and down. And their warrant officers, there's a limit we can fly per month. So a certain amount of hours you can fly per month before you have to get what's called reset by the flight surgeon. And they were overflying that. And so when I showed up, it was my old unit from Bragg that was there.
Mm-hmm.
So I showed up. I had my girlfriend send me my flight helmet from Bragg and my flight records, so I could go up and I say, "Hey, I'm here." And normally warrant officers are very touchy about you taking their flight time, but they were flying so much, they're like, "Sir, you fly whenever you want." So,
Yeah.
so I flew a bunch while I was there. I flew about 300 hours of combat while I was part of Task Force Falcon.
Yeah.
Shit.
And so that was a lot
It's
of
incredible. It's an incredible story, man. That's what we
Yeah.
can talk about someday.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But yeah, so I ended up coming over to you guys. So initially, I was the brigade, what they called the Raven, which was the regimental aviation officer, which changed over to something called the brigade aviation officer. So I was sitting in that position, and 173 Cav was going to JRTC, and they were looking for our asymmetric warfare group brothers would say, "Hey, we're going to do a lot of aviation stuff. We should probably bring an aviator with us just for the rotation." So I went down to JRTC with you guys, and we got done with the rotation, and I'm sure you remember that very clearly. It was a rough rotation. I mean, it was hard, and we knew what we were preparing. I didn't know what we were preparing to go do yet. Nobody told me yet, but I knew we were doing a lot of aviation stuff, and so we were doing 300-man air assaults every other day, and so the AWG guys came back and pulled Davidson aside. And they asked me, they're like, "Hey, we're going to Iraq. You want to go?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, I want to go." And so I ended up, they talked to Colonel Davidson. Colonel Davidson talked to Major Maz at the time and said, "Hey, we want to take Benoit." And so that's how I got pulled on the team. I joined Task Force Falcon on Green Ramp the day we were leaving to go to Iraq.
Yeah.
So showed up and great deployment. My eyes were wide open at that point because I was a lieutenant. I was on the list. My number just hadn't come up yet. And I remember we were standing outside our higher headquarters in Balad, and Davidson had taken me up there, and I was wearing first lieutenant rank. And he's like, "Man, you can't go in there as a lieutenant. Like, you just can't. Like, you can't go into that headquarters as a lieutenant." I was like, "Sir, I don't know what to tell you." He's like, "Well, are you promotable?" I'm like, "I'm promotable, sir, but my number's not going to come up for like 2 months." And there was another captain that was there. He's like, "Hey, you got any extra rank?" This is where we're in the gray
That's how
stuff.
Davidson was too.
And he literally just pinned captain on me in front of the porta-john right outside the headquarters.
Nice.
And so I walked in as a captain, and I don't think it mattered, but probably could have just taken my rank off and nobody would have cared. But yeah. So that was.
I don't think, Keith, that anybody expected it to be that way for that mission.
No.
I think, be honest with you, man, I think we were the most proficient air assault. Like, if it's battalion we were the most proficient at air assaults in the whole Army. Like, I think how many we did for that 15 months of like Pathfinder operations, air coordination with air, coordination with everything from ground to high at all different systems through special operations command. Like, that was, to me, man, dude, you could have just pinned Pathfinder badges on everybody that was on there because at that point it was we
I
were
was out
very
there doing
proficient.
Pathfinder ops. I was out setting up LZ. That's why I would go out with you guys a lot of times was like, hey, you're the helicopter guy. I'm like, yep, got it. And that's where I learned a ton. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting where I am right now had it not been for that deployment. One, because of the relationships that I made with some of our special operations brothers, that those paid off very well, as I'll talk about later in future jobs. But the knowledge that I learned working alongside some of the NCOs in Task Force Falcon, I can't remember the guy's name. The guy's name was Steve. He was a Sergeant First Class, I think, infantry guy. He went on to become a helicopter pilot, actually, because he was thinking about dropping his warrant packet, and I helped him do it. But I remember him taking me out when we were at JRTC, and he's like, hey, sir, this is how you set up an LZ. And he showed me how to do it day, night, and everything else. And then when we went out and started doing some of our operations in Task Force Falcon, it came down to like, hey, you're the helicopter guy. You know how to do this, right? I'm like, well, yeah, I do now. But I also learned everything about our unmanned, our UAS. I learned unmanned aircraft systems. I learned all about our ISR assets that we had either with us or with our higher headquarters inside special operations. I learned about Air Force stuff. I remember the first time we did all those transloads there. I know you remember those.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time somebody asked me, Davidson came in, he's like, how many people can I put in an MC-130? I'm like, sir, I have no idea. I don't even know what an MC-130 is. And he was like, well, figure it out, dude. And so I did.
It was nut to butt.
Oh, it was. That was with ratchet straps.
Yeah.
I hopped right in there with you.
Yeah, I think, I think it's good to have, like you said, for all those guys in the Kiowas, man, to have those ground pounders fly that stuff for the arts infantry guys like me and Chris. And we have that trust for what you guys know, like you were on the ground and Task Force Falcon, you grew up as a, infantry guy and just seeing that, because it's so much of, it's such trust, right? And then having that bond together, like, like the Marine Corps, you could see their pods, they wear like the camel covers or whatever, just because that their relationship with the grunts and stuff. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Hey man, so I'm gonna ask you, do you remember the Mud LZ in Task
I was just gonna bring that up.
Dude, so, can you explain to me what happened? Because
it's still my favorite, and may he of course rest in peace. He's a common friend of ours, Keith Callahan. But Keith, it was my favorite moment with him was I was in Balad that night. I had come down and there was weather, so you guys were coming off the LZ. I didn't go out on the op, but they sent me down to coordinate like lodging for you guys and all that other stuff because I was at Balad. And so they were like, hey man, like you got to go down there and handle this. I'm like, all right, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. And so I go out to the LZ to pick you guys up because I had a truck and whatever. And I go down there and you guys are getting off that thing. And I mean, I saw Keith, and he it's still my favorite. And you have the photo. I've seen the photo. Right?
I do have the photo.
And that's how I'll always remember him. It's just coming out there being like, man, this is bullshit. Like, come on, with the Boston accent and everything, I think the unknown part of that was, so a couple guys lost their boots. I
almost lost my boots.
Like the boots were literally sucked off their feet because the idiot lieutenant that was setting up the LZs. The mud was so thick, like the guys were coming off the back of a Chinook without boots.
Yeah, and Chris, so the context is Keith might be able to tell a little bit of the thing, but I only know the infantry side, but we were staged to jump on the birds are coming in, and we didn't see the LZ until we started like, hey, the bird's down, ramps down. We start moving out, and it was, I'm not going to shit you, like this mud had to be up to my thighs.
Oh yeah.
And where were y'all?
Oh, fuck,
I think it was south of Balad.
Yeah, somewhere like that.
You guys were working south of Balad.
Yeah, so like. Dudes, like we went to the wrong bird initially, and there's like, dude, like go back over the other bird, and Keith's like, get the fuck over there, like, and then we're like crawling, and dudes are like, weapons are stuck in the mud, and dudes are on their bellies like crawling on the back of the seat. I remember Keith was just like, because I had to crawl on too because I was smoked, and Keith crawls on and. He gets to Balad, man, and he like
miserable.
He's got mud up to his like he's covered from
his whole face.
Like, yeah, and he was he's fire. He got killed later on. He's a platoon I talked about earlier, but he he was so fired up. He's so pissed.
Oh yeah.
And, we're like, who did the recon? Like, it's just Keith. But
So anyway, guys are coming off the back and they don't have boots, and it was a couple of privates that probably got the worst of it, unfortunately, as happens in the infantry at times. And so they came off without boots, and I went over to supply over at the headquarters there at the compound. I was like, hey, I need boots. Like, I got to get some. And they gave me like one pair. They're like, man, that's all we got. I was like, okay. So of course, being a single captain at the time, making a bunch of money, I literally just went over to the PX. I took everybody's boot size and I bought 6 pairs of boots, and I gave them to the guys, you know.
Yeah,
and I was like, hey guys, like,
that's pretty awesome.
I've been where you are. It sucks.
Yep.
You don't need, because, oh, by the way, you're going to have to stay at Balad for the night in those stables. And then I got you a flight home the next day. But I was like, man, like, you guys can't go without boots. And the other part of that story was, I think it was with Keith and 2 other guys. I went to Chow that night, and it's Balad. So of course it's like fine china and everything else. And we're not used to eating like that. And so we go up there, and I'm the only clean guy, and everybody else is just nasty, covered in mud and everything else. And everybody sits down and eats, and this sergeant major from the 1st Cav like calls me over, because I was the only one wearing rank at the time too. I didn't have a sterilized uniform on. He's like, hey, Captain, come here. I'm like, hey, what's up, Sergeant Major? He's like, those guys can't be in here. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, they can't be in here. You know, they're dirty. They're dirty. I'm like, Sergeant Major, these guys haven't slept in 2 days. And I'm looking over at you guys, and you guys are just like pissed off at the world, you know. And I was like, you want to go tell them? Feel free. And he's like, and he just got mad and walked away. And I was like, if you want to talk to my boss, he's over on the compound. He's a 3-star. Like, his name is Stan McChrystal. Like, if you want to take it up with him, or Sergeant Major Ferris, you know. I was like, you're welcome to take it up with Sergeant Major Ferris. And he was like,
I tell you, Keith, that to me, man. When you talk about like combat vets versus combat vets' experience, like perspectives, like there's 2 different perspectives. There's those guys like that Sergeant Major just probably didn't leave the fob, because every time we went to that chow hall, we had that issue, right?
Yep.
I think every time we went there, somebody's like, you didn't shave, or you can't eat here. Like, it's like, bro, like, we have no control. We fly here for a night, and then we fly away. Like, we don't have shit with us except for the stuff that we packed. And there was always some fucking sergeant major or somebody yelling at us about our fucking shit. So whatever.
No, I agree. And you know, that deployment was amazing. I learned a ton from, like I said, mostly from the other NCOs. We had great officers. Chris Hockenberry was the 3. So he was my direct boss, who I came across him in JSOC later. And Ross Davidson, you know, I love Ross. He's a little wild, but you know, I came across him about 10 years later. He was the G3 for I-Corps out of JBLM, and I was an S3. And you know, I walked into the on-post bar, and he was sitting in the corner. It was him and actually him and Command Sergeant Major Love, because he was the division sergeant major at the time. And the 2 of them see me, and they're like, "Oh man, airborne! How you doing?" And the 2 of them just like dogpiled on me, and I was like, "Man, this is great." And I was with the rest of my team from the 3 shop, and Davidson was like, "You have no idea what this guy's the crazy stuff we did together." And they're all looking at me like, "What'd you do, sir?" Like, I was like, "Don't worry about it." Like, it was a pretty wild deployment, but you talk about being proficient at air assault. Like, so I was a CAV squadron commander, and I used to joke with my air assault commander, Rob Kazmarek, great guy. And I would always joke with him. I'm like, dude, I've planned and executed more air assaults than you, I promise. And he's like, why do you say that? I was like, dude, I did for like 18 months or 15, however long we were there. I did that every night. You know, I was in the air assault planning process at some point, and every 96 hours we launched 300 paratroopers somewhere into the somewhere, and did it every day. And it was like, hey, we get done with one, and we'd kick you out the door if I wasn't going out on it. And it was like, all right, plan the next one. And of course, Davidson, he was all over it. Colonel Davidson. I mean, he was like, all right, what's next? You know, and he always wanted to know what was next. So, you know, again, you know, you lost friends on that deployment. I lost friends on that deployment. And that part was tough. That was my intro to losing friends on a deployment as well. You know, between Keith and Eric Foster, who were, you know, Keith, I always tell a story of, you know, we didn't know each other, but I always heard his accent. I'm like, man, that dude's got to be from Boston. Like, I've lost my Boston accent over the years, but I know So we were sitting down. I think I've told the story before to you, but the New England Patriots were playing the Indianapolis Colts. It was like 4 days before he died, actually. And the two of us were sitting in the little MWR tent we had there, which was absolute garbage. And they were like, we both sat down. We're the only two people there, and we're both cheering. I was like, "Where are you from, man?" And he told me, and I was like, "Damn, I'm from Worcester." He was from Woburn, and I was like, "Oh, well, shit." And we were actually only born about a month apart. So I mean, it was awesome, and it was terrible. Obviously, when we got the word, I wasn't on the op, but I got the word there, and I was like, "Man, like that's right." But it was unfortunately the first of many, throughout my career that
I think the Captain Foster one was hard too, because I was a company commander.
that was really hard.
Yeah.
I actually carried a lot of weight on my shoulders from that, just because there was a problem with the LZs and stuff like that. It was nothing I could have done, but I felt terrible about it. It's like, man, if I had just put this here instead of here, like maybe you would have lived. And I'm pretty transparent about it. I've gone to talk to professionals about it, and they're like, "Man, that wasn't your fault," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I carry that weight, and I think we all carry some side of kind of weight." So,
for sure.
But no, I like I said, learned a ton on that deployment. Came out of there, and then went to the career course. Spent another 8 months at Fort Rucker, and then went. Actually, the good part was I went to division for a little while I was waiting to go, and they got me to go to jump master school, which was awesome. Not many aviation guys with a senior wings anymore, so I'm very happy about that. I was a little pissed off I couldn't get my last 5 in to get my master, but while I was at JSOC, but I couldn't. But did get to go to jump master school, strap hang on a bunch of jumps, so I got to do that coming out of the 82nd, and then. Coming out of there, I got selected to go to 3rd Infantry Division down at Hunter Army Airfield, which is pretty awesome. What a great location. Was all set to take troop command. And then about a month before that, they were like, "Hey, man, 2nd Brigade's on a short notice deployment. And you've been an air officer before, and they need an air officer, so you got to go." I was like, "All right, cool." So I went, and I went on the deployment. It was in Mosul, so we were at Diamondback. Spent about 3 months there, and then the brigade commander came up to me and said, "Hey, ma'am," he said, "You're a former infantry guy, right?" I was like, "Yeah, I was, sir." And he said, "Well," he said, "we got a problem. I got a Cav troop opening up in Alpha Troop 37 Cavalry, and I need a commander, and I don't want to bring a new guy in. So what do you think about taking command?" I was like, "Of a ground unit?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I looked on the map because I was the chief of operations for the brigade at the time. And I looked where Alpha 37 was. They were the only troop outside the wire. Everybody else was kind of inside the wire doing QRL. I was like, man, like, okay. So I end up out 2 weeks later. I'm out at a place called Al Kissick out near Talifar. And I'm out doing route clearance and doing.
How was the reception for that, Keith? Like, how was going into a company like the first time? Like, shit, like I got to.
Yeah, it's funny you ask because when I first showed up, as we do as officers that time, you come in with a lot of motivation, you want to do a lot of stuff, and I was like, man, this is gonna be fun. I just decided I was gonna have fun with it. I think I was 15 years in the Army at that point, so I'm like, well, worst that can happen is I screwed up real bad, and I got to retire as a major, But I ended up, I had a good reception initially. I'll tell you why I had a good reception. I had a great first sergeant, a guy named Clint Davis. He just retired as a sergeant major. Just an amazing dude, tanker, like biggest dude you ever seen in your life. I don't know how the hell he fit in a tank, but he pretty much told me, he sat me down. I did my, initial counseling as you do with your first sergeant. And he was like, "Hey, sir, my only goal while you're here is to make sure you have a successful command and that you enjoy your time in command." And I was like,
"That's awesome. That's
okay."
Awesome.
And I told him, I said, "Look, I've been out of the infantry for a while." I said, "So I'm going to need you to have my back on some stuff. And if I'm doing something stupid, you got to let me know." And he's like, "Sir, I got you." And he did. He did a great job of it. I'm eternally grateful to Clint for that. Come to find out later is funny. I still keep in touch as we do with all our, E4s. Doesn't really matter at this point. Most of them are out of the Army. So I still keep in touch with them. I write them letters of recommendation for jobs and stuff like that whenever I can. But my driver came to my promotion to colonel, and we were telling, he said, "Sir, before we really got to know you, we wondered what did we screw up to end up with a pilot as our troop commander. Like, how did this happen? And I was like, well, man, I guess it worked out, right? And he's like, yeah, no, it was good. Like, it was a great experience, and the good part was when I was in command, because I had a good relationship with the Kiowa unit, because I knew all the guys, they were from Riley. They would, they would, at the time, our brigade commander wanted them hovering over Missoula all the time to do counter mortar rocket interdiction. And the only way they could track them was through BFT. And so when they knew I was going, because we did ops all the time, I was partnering with the 2nd Iraqi Army Commandos. And so I was in a stack kicking down doors in downtown Mosul as an aviator,
Yeah.
and I would pass my con ops to the aviation guys. They'd shut off their Blue Force trackers so that the brigade couldn't see them anymore, and they'd come out and support us all the time. My guys loved it. I mean, just typical Kiowa stuff. We're coming back off an op after being out all night, and it's just sun's coming up. We're headed back to the house, and the Kiowas are flying at gunner level coming back, and my guys are just loving it. And they always appreciated the fact that we got air whenever we needed it, because I had that personal relationship. But that was an incredible. So I commanded there for 18 months, 9 of which was in combat. We had asymmetric warfare group come out and work with us, and we did. That's where I saw Chris Hockenberry again, because as they were known at the time, Task Force North, which was one of the JSOC task forces that was there. We worked in their area, and once Hawk found out I was the commander of that unit, we started doing ops for them like a mini Task Force Falcon. So if there was something that needed to be rooted out, they'd send us in first to cause trouble. And then all of a sudden, all these things they hadn't seen in the past, like all these people that were hidden, would just start popping up.
Yeah, stirring the pot.
Yeah, and that's what we do. So once Hawk found out I was there, we started stirring the pot for Task Force North. And so we found a mission in that too. So just a great experience. I took what we learned in Task Force Falcon and I applied it. We were the QRF. We did missions where I would get an hour's notice to go. And I'd be like, all right, hey, ConOp's already in the bucket. Let's go. Like, we'll just fill in the blanks. I actually had a lot of my stuff from TFF, some of the ConOps and stuff like that. And I would just fill them out with what we had. And it worked. I mean, I had a good squadron commander who was pretty open-minded about it. He knew I had some experience with special operations, and he knew I had some experience in the infantry. So he pretty much let me do whatever the hell I wanted to do. I'd pretty much just work from.
Keith's got a question. So real quick,
Yeah.
So like, you're out of the seat for 18 months, right?
Yep.
How does that, I mean, is it like riding a bike? You know what I'm saying? Like, do you have to, like, how do you jump back into it? Do you jump back in the seat and fly?
Yeah.
Like, how does,
And if you really think about it, I had been out of the seat since Task Force Falcon. So I hadn't flown. The last time I flew an aircraft was May of 2007. Actually, a little bit later than that, June of 2007, I stopped flying because the 82nd unit left. And so I didn't have that connection to fly anymore when I was with TFF. And I didn't fly again until I reported to the National Training Center in August of 2011.
Jeez.
And it was like, it was tough. But I was flying the 58 Charlie, which is like an unarmed version of the 58D. And so, I'm not the best stick in the world. I'll never claim to be. Most officers aren't. That's what we rely on our warrant officers for. Warrant officers in aviation are very similar to our non-commissioned officers in the infantry. So, our non-commissioned officers in aviation, there's some really good ones. And unfortunately, there's more. I hate to say it, but some not so great ones. I've been blessed with having a lot of really good ones. But when I showed up to the 82nd Airborne, for instance, my platoon sergeant. So I came from the infantry. I'm like platoon sergeant. Like, this is my guy. Like, he's going to take me under his wing and teach me the ways. And I get there, and my platoon sergeant had failed his PT test like 2 weeks before I got there. And I was like, man, okay, like, you got to counsel him. I'm like, hey man, like, at the time we're still on jump status. Like, dude, we're the 82nd Airborne Division. Like, this is the unit I grew up idolizing. What coming up, you know? So you're a non-commissioned officer in the 82nd Airborne Division. Like, figure it out. And he failed his PT test again when he retook it. And I was like, dude, I got to process you out of the Army. And he's like, wow, sir, that's garbage. Like, I can't believe you're doing that. I'm at 15 years and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, look, man, you can't meet the standard. Like, I got to stick by what I got to stick by, and I caught a lot of flack for that. it is what it is. I mean, in the end, and I have a very high expectation. And I always tell NCOs that work for me, that work on my team, I'm like, I have a very high expectation of NCOs because I was brought up by some of the best. I mean, actually, when you and I were there, was Wolf Amaker the sergeant major, the division sergeant major when you were there?
He was, I think. I might be
Yeah.
wrong, but I think he
So
was.
you want to feel old. His kid works for me now. He's a
Yeah.
lieutenant colonel.
Jeez.
But guys like that, and guys like Sergeant Major Flowers, and all these great non-commissioned officers I had to look up to, both as an enlisted soldier. Mario Terranis is another one. Mario Terranis and I were enlisted. We were NCOs together, and then I show up to 10th Mountain as a battalion commander, and he's my division sergeant major. I was like, oh
Yeah.
my god, But he's another guy. And
Is it because you think because of they're more technical than they are tactical, or?
I just had this discussion because I'm the director for the Directorate of Training and Doctrine for all of the aviation branch now. That's what the desk job they give you, I guess, when you become an 06. And so one of the things I'm passionate about is NCO education, and so we shortchange our NCOs a lot in professionalizing the force, I believe, and if there was ways, if they made me king for a day, which they never will, I would change a lot of things. And I had this discussion. Enlisted training branch kind of makes all the stuff for the NCO academies and stuff. And I had this discussion and with a bunch of NCOs, and they're like, sir, we would love to do what you want to do. I'm like, yeah. But the problem is, as an infantry sergeant and staff sergeant, which is what I was when I switched over, like I was leading since I was 19 years old. And I was, no kidding, leading a mortar squad at 19 years old. And even at 25, when I switched over and I was a staff sergeant, I was leading a section. I had an 81 section, and I was doing leader things. Our folks, like, we have squad leaders in aviation. Their squad is 2 guys, and they know how to turn a wrench. And unfortunately, when we make them sergeants first class, they're expected to be leaders immediately. They're like, oh yeah, hey, by the way, you're a leader now. And we don't set them up. And unless they've had good mentorship, we don't set them up well, unfortunately. And so, it does. It's unfortunate, but no, so got done with my time there and working with the great NCOs that I worked with at 37 Cavalry. And I came out and I was told I was going to get a command inside the aviation brigade. I was like, awesome, great. I showed up and the brigade commander was like, hey man, your command complete. I was like, but sir, you told me I could go to this aviation. I'd go to do this job and I'd come back and you give me a command. He was like, sorry, man, can't help you. So I asked for the next best thing, which was National Training Center. I called out there. They said they'd give me command of their flight detachment for a year, and then I'd have to do 2 years as an OC as well. So I went out there, met my Army dad, if you will, my mentor, a guy named Major General Bill Ryan. He's the 8th Army J3 right now, but he was a lieutenant colonel at the time, kind of took me under his wing and said, hey, man, you've got an interesting, diverse background. I think you'd be a great asset to our branch, even if other people don't realize it, because there were some people within the branch that kind of looked down on the fact that I had spent a lot of time outside of aviation. But once I got back up as a pilot, started flying. And the cool thing about NTC, it's the only place other than in the regiment where you fly single pilot. So I just be by myself in a 58, just cruising around. And it was awesome. I flew the CG around, got a chance to know he's a retired lieutenant general now, Paul Calvert, just retired as the Force Comm deputy commander. But he's another guy. I got time to sit with an 06 inside a helicopter for 4 or 5 hours at a time, just listening to him. And he's just a great guy and smart guy. So really learned a ton.
I tell you, Keith, I get an appreciation of what the OH-58 does just by me and Chris got the opportunity to fly in a Little Bird. I don't know. It's a different aircraft. It's a different aircraft, but it's still small and it's agile.
It's very similar.
And it's like, flying it, like I flew left seat and I think Chris did too, but just seeing, like, we got to shoot some rockets and stuff. And the 58 just saw it. Going up, flying, you're dropping the nose, shooting some rockets, shooting some guns, and the guns are like right next to you, right there. The rockets are right there, and that was just a cool experience. I couldn't imagine you guys doing that every day, to get up out of work, do some PT, and then jump in an aircraft to fly. That's to me, it's awesome.
When I was over in Iraq that time, when I was flying the 58B there up in where we were up at Spiker. I remember my first engagement, we were doing something there was a vehicle. And I remember the right seater said to me, it was Brian, I'd known him. He's the guy who taught me how to fly the 58 actually. So we had a great opportunity to fly with him in combat. And, we had M4, we keep our M4s right there on the dash, And I remember him saying, we were completely Winchester. So out of rockets, out of 50 cal. And he's like, hey, we got to stop that vehicle. He's like, I'm going to come down. I'm going to hover in front of it. And I just need you to take your M4 out and point it at him. I was like, all right, I guess that's what we'll do then. And he came down to about a 10-foot hover. I pulled out the M4, just pointed at the guy, and I just saw two hands come up behind the wheel like this. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yep.
I was like,
Nice.
I think we just did a day vehicle interdiction. That sounds like something a different unit does. So
Yeah.
It was incredible. And getting to fly it out at NTC, although not in combat, the cool part about it was because I was single pilot all the time, and I had a ton of friends that were infantry guys that were OCs and stuff like that I'd served with in the past. A lot of times I'd just call them on the radio and I'd say, hey, what are you doing? And they'd be like, I'm out here with my infantry unit, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, you got time to go flying? They're like, hell yeah. So I just go out, land next to them. They'd hop in the left seat. We go out and fly, and I just take them out. That way they could see the whole National Training Center. And because I had to do a range sweep every morning to make sure no, methods came in from out Barstow, California onto the range when they were going to shoot live, which was a thing. You live in Southern California, you know how that can be. And, so I'd take them out on the range sweep every morning and I'd fly them around, do some good maneuvers with them and stuff like that. And, much like you get an opportunity to do it, I think it gave them a whole new perspective on
true. Yeah.
What we do. And
100%.
that gun being next to you, the rookie joke on all the new lieutenants and W1s is you go out and shoot gunnery for the first time. And I guess I should have heard somebody telling me that this was going to happen, but I didn't. And I just remember we're doing a couple of engagements in the W3 in the right seat. He's like, hey, sir. He's like, do me a favor. He's like, stick your head out there. I think the gun's jammed. I was like, yeah, okay. And as soon as I would stick my head out, he'd crank that 50 cal right next to my head. And I'm like, oh, man. I'd come back in. He's just giggling to himself. I was like, yeah, you got me. That's the only time that's going to happen. But, I mean, we would yank and bank that thing to the limits of its – and that's unfortunately with it being gone, we in some of the other airframes we have, you just can't do what you did with that. And I mean, we would yank and bank that thing all over the place. I was doing, one at JRTC where I had a warrant officer in the left seat. I was in the right seat. And this guy he was kind of a jerk to everybody. He would make fun of everybody if they threw up. And sometimes I can honestly say I've never had gotten air sick, but sometimes people did, because you'd be looking down, then you look back up and like the world's going in 3 different directions and you just yak out the door. But I remember I took him and we were doing for a JRTC rotation, and I was yanking and banking this thing all over the place, and just putting on a little bit of a show for the guys on the ground. But it was all combat maneuvers that we would do in combat. And I remember him looking over at me. He looked green when I was like, "You all right?" He's like, yeah. Can you just fly a little straight and level, sir? I was like, yeah, I can fly straight and level. And so I flew straight and level for a little bit, but then we got back into an engagement. I'm like, hey man, I got to do my thing. And he's like, all right. So I'm going back to, and then I look over and he's just yakking out the left door. And we got back, and all the other warrants who had given such a hard time to, we landed and he's like, sir, please don't say anything. I'm like, I'm going to say something.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm keeping this a secret. I was like, and you're cleaning the rocket pod up because that's nasty.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was an amazing aircraft. And much like Chris said, I was at the Navy War College. I was lucky enough to get selected instead of going to Fort Leavenworth. I just really didn't want to. And I'm from Massachusetts, so I thought it'd be really cool to go back to Newport, Rhode Island for a year. Yeah. Plus, I didn't have to wear a uniform for a year, which was nice, unlike Leavenworth. So, I asked to go back up there. And when I left, I had a by name request to go up to JBLM to be an S3 for 4-6 Cavalry. And it was going to be a 58 guy again. I'm like, man, I'm so excited. Like, I get to fly the 58. Like, this is awesome. And while I was at Navy War College, they did something called the Aviation Restructure Initiative, which eliminated the 58. And so I had no aircraft. I was like, man, this is rough. Like, and unfortunately in aviation, it became a have and have not, where they basically said like, hey, for warrant officers and lieutenants and captains and majors. They were like, hey, half of you are going to get an aircraft transition, and the other half, sorry, like there's nothing we can do. You can go to a non-flying job and be a aviation officer somewhere, but and I had a lot of friends that got kind of screwed that way. But I was fortunate. I had that by name request from then now Colonel Ryan, who's going to be my brigade commander. And so I got selected to go to the Apache course, and they gave me the choice. Like, you want to fly Apaches, Black Hawk, or Chinooks? I was like, there's no question about what I want to fly. I mean, there's no way. I mean, all respect to the Black Hawk and Chinook pilots, especially within the regiment, who do amazing things with those aircraft, but it just didn't fit my personality. And so I was like, I need to go guns. Like, I need something that's going to shoot back. And so I did. I had to come down here for I had to leave the Navy War College 2 weeks early. I graduated, but didn't get to go to my own graduation. And then I came down here to Fort Rucker, did about 4.5 months here, learning how to fly the Apache. And that was a huge transition for me. I was used to having no doors. I could see everything. And now I'm stuck in this like, titanium bathtub where I can't see anything. And I'm looking through a monocle to see, one of the things they do something called the bag. So they basically black out the entire cockpit. So you can't see out. And the only thing is during the day in the summer in Alabama, which is not cool at all. It's like 500 degrees in the sauna. And we make fun of the movie Firebirds, if you ever seen that. But
I've seen it.
It's just like it. They stick you in the bag and they put this little monocle on you. Yeah, exactly. And I used to make fun of those guys when I was a Kyle guy. I'm like, man, now I'm an Apache guy. Like, what am I going to do? But made it through that. And I think the cool part was I'd been a cab officer, and then there's a special, and Jerry and Chris, I know you've worked with cab guys, and they tend to be obnoxious and wear funny hats and all this other good stuff, but there's a mentality to it. That's why I was so happy to take a cab squadron, because like esprit de corps is built in. Like, they think they're better than everybody else, and they're happy to tell you. And there's a reason why. And so everybody was worried when the 58D left. They were like, man, like we're much like you're talking about, we're going to lose that caliber of, guys who are crazy and are willing to come down and fly at the treetops and all that other good stuff. But they took half of us and put us in these cavalry squadrons that were now Apache units. And the great part was everybody brought that cav mentality. And that's why, like, when I deployed to Iraq in 16, 17, and it was a very kinetic fight. We still flew the same. We still did the same things. We were still crazy. The ground guys still appreciated it. And so we brought that mentality with us. And so I think that was a huge part of it. But, I ended up at JBLM, got to 4-6 Cav, spent about 6 months at home station. And then we got tagged to go to Iraq. At the time, we were told, like, hey, there's nothing going on. Like, ISIS is doing some stuff, but don't worry about it. Like, it requires a general officer to fire a hellfire. Don't sweat it. You guys are just going to sit on the fob for 9 months. We're like, great, this ought to be fun. After about 3 months before we got there, the offensive kicked off. And so at the time, it was a unit from 10th Mountain Division 110 attack. And the 101st, General Valesky was the division commander at the time. And they started actually doing gun raids. And I was like, man, this is like Falcon again. Like, we're going back in, And right as we got there, the president, it was President Obama at the time, put out a tactical directive saying, hey, it doesn't require a general officer to sign off on Hellfire anymore. It's the tactical commander on the ground, much like we were used to during the surge. And we're like, all right, game on. And we ended up, so ISIS had the full complement of surface-to-air missiles that they had stolen from the Iraqis. They had all of the air defense artillery. They had BM-21 rockets. They had everything. And the Abrams tanks. I got to shoot an Abrams tank while I was there. Never thought that would happen.
No.
They had an Abrams they couldn't use anymore. They were just using it as like a pillbox.
Yeah.
And so we were able to put a Hellfire on it. But we shot 1,600 Hellfires in 9 months.
Yeah.
We shot everything, and it was some tier 1 special operations units that were on the ground that we were in direct support of. And about 3 months into it, we got a notification. It was actually through an old JSOC friend who I saw at all places. Kelly Pickler was throwing a USO concert for Christmas. And we're all out there with our Stetsons on, like annoying Cav guys like we are. And this guy in plain clothes comes up. He's like, "Hey, you're Keith, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Hey, man, it's Ryan. Like, we know each other from, back in the day." I'm like, "I believe you. I don't really remember you, but," and he told me who he was and who he worked for. And I was like, "Oh, okay. I remember that unit." And he said, "Hey, you're about to get orders to go to Syria." And I was like, "What are you
Hey,
talking?"
Keith, going back to the Mosul
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
like you guys, it was all urban fight, right?
Oh, Mosul,
Was it?
absolutely.
So, like, how do you guys identify? Like, I guess there
Yeah.
wasn't much friendlies
No.
within the old part of Old Mosul. I guess was
Yeah, Old
what I
Mosul was
saw.
that was a fight. But no, so we had the general structure of how it worked. So we had it was awesome. 2nd Brigade 82nd came in, which was great. Obviously knew James Downing and Pat Work, General Work was the brigade commander at the time. So it was good to have some old teammates that I was in support of. And the way they would do it was the Iraqi army was in the lead, and say what you will sometimes about the Iraqi army, experiences may vary. But they fought hard in that fight, and so about usually a little behind them would be 2nd Brigade, and they were responsible a lot of times for coordinating fires, whether it be direct or indirect fires. We had a stack any given day of 20 aircraft at the top, and I was somewhere in the middle. I had some UAS below me, and I had some UAS above me, some B-52s and B-1s up top, and we would just take it to them every day. And inside Mosul. It was, I won't say it was a free fire area by any means. It wasn't. We still had to identify and all that other good stuff, but VBIDs were the much like when we were in Falcon.
Yeah.
VBIDs were the weapon they like to use, and so that was what we were used for the most part, was detecting and just schwacking VBIDs wherever we found them. And so it was a tough urban fight, but we were. We had great people on the ground, both on the special operations side and within 2nd Brigade, the Falcon Brigade, that were there, that were guiding us onto targets pretty much every day. It was kind of a joke. If you came back with Hellfires on the rail, like the crew chiefs would make fun of you. And hey, sir, like, what's up? You couldn't find anything to shoot today? I'm like, man, come on, leave me alone.
Yeah.
I tried.
Were you guys flying day and night? Was it like
Yeah. We were. It was. I will tell you, this was the enemy was kind of solar powered on this one. So we started out flying a lot of night stuff, but then we figured out like nobody wanted to come out and play at night. So it was mostly day, which is obviously infinitely more dangerous, flying during the day in that big rig. 58, I was always pretty comfortable. I could get out of the way of stuff. That thing, man, is 20,000 pounds of killing. So, and you take off with 8 Hellfires on any given day, and you're going to find targets for those things. And
Keith, I always wonder, do you guys go back and like grab like a non-alcoholic beer and watch gun camera footage?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That was a great shot. Like, what the
absolutely.
hell? That was great.
Our Bravo troop, so they were the guys that were up in Mosul with us. We had guys down in Taji, and I had folks, actually, as crazy as this was, I had a troop in Afghanistan, a troop in Taji, and then a troop with us up in Mosul. And Bravo troop was up there in their pilot area because we're going to make things cozy. We actually had stadium seating inside their little theater they had inside their pilot area, and we had a huge screen TV because, of course, you have those. And I've never seen more big screen TVs in my life than when I was deployed. But we had a big screen TV in there, and we'd go over them. But much like it was fun to watch, but I'll tell you, the senior warrant officers were there telling us everything we did wrong. And it was the AARs that we did. We'd grab a non-alcoholic beer, smoke a cigar, and watch these things. They'd be like, "Hey, sir, you could have, you came in on this angle, but like, you could have come in this way, and it would have been better." And I'm like, "Okay, like, got it." And the good part was, it was we're all kind of thick-skinned organization, much like a special operations unit, where you come in and just kind of tear each other up. Like, man, you could have done that better. Why didn't you do that? And then you come away and you're like, man, okay, I could have done that better. I will do that better next time. I won't make the same mistake twice. And the targets we had, I mean, it was funny. We would get the high priority target list every day, or high payoff target list. And it would be like one day it was, VBIDs. And then the next day it was bulldozers, because the ISIS was building berms in the area. So like, hey, any bulldozer you see, shoot it. I don't care what it's doing. Like, all right. So we shot every bulldozer in Mosul. And then we actually got these new, that the Army came out with an oh yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been a good day to be a bulldozer dealer after that. And then we got something called the APKWS, which is the Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System, which is a laser guided rocket. And we used those. One of the days we took East Mosul, and so we cleared the whole thing. And then they went to West Mosul and started going to the old city. And what they were doing at night was taking boats back and forth. So then the HPTL came out the next day. They were like, kill every boat. We're like, awesome, kill the ISIS Navy. So we went in with APKWS with these laser guided rockets, and I mean, we must have killed 100 boats. And whether they had people in them or didn't, they didn't care. So it would have been a good day after all that. Like if you're a boat dealer or a bulldozer dealer or a dump truck dealer, like you're gonna make some money after that. But yeah, we did a lot of damage inside Mosul.
Let me ask you, why do you guys ask for initials?
What's that? Oh,
why do you guys ask? Yeah, commander's initials.
Yeah,
what does that matter? Like,
I don't know, because the J Fire tells me I have to. I always kind of laughed at that because I'm like, yeah, hey, good, for danger close, send your initials, and I didn't write that down. I mean, I guess we always do what's called talk to the tape. So every engagement we have is taped, and so is the voiceover. So actually, the first engagement we had, because I hadn't shot a Hellfire before at anything. I'd shot some in training, but I hadn't done it. And so the first mission we went out on was in East Mosul, and it was pretty early on. And I went out, the battalion commander from the outgoing unit was flying with us. We had the new E model helicopters, which are G-Wiz, a lot of good G-Wiz stuff on there. And they had the older D model helicopters. But we went out as a pair, and the battalion commander, he was an interesting guy, good guy. But we did the pre-flight, and he was like, hey, during the brief, he's like, don't worry, any shots that need to be taken, we'll take them. Like, you guys are just here to support us and ride along, and that way you get your local area orientation. And we're like, great, okay, sir, got it. So we go up and we get a call, and they're like, hey, there's a VBID. We're like, I see it. Awesome. And there was a UAS overhead, a Reaper drone. And they were like, hey, we got good lays on the target. And I'm like, and so I was following, I was in the front seat. So I'm following along to make sure I know how to do it. But the other aircraft's got it. And I'm following. I'm like, all right, cool. And you get a big box that shows up when you get good laser energy on there. So I'm like, oh, cool. This UAV's up there. And I could pull his feed into my cockpit so I could see what he saw. I'm like, yep, there's the VBID. I don't see it, but he does. And I see I got a good laser on it. And the other aircraft was like, yep, we'll take the engagement. I'm like, great. Well, they go to take the engagement. They had a launcher fail. So their stuff failed. And I'm like, hey, I'm good. I'm in. And the guy the warrant I was flying with, he was brand new to the Apache community too. And I'm, this is my first flight in an Apache in combat. So I'm like, oh man, like we're going to get an engagement on this. And we go in, launch it. And we launched it from pretty far out. It was about like a minute time of flight, which is a long time for a missile to fly. It was about 6 miles away. And all of a sudden we just see this look like a nuclear bomb go off, and we blew it up and we hit it. And we're both just losing it in the cockpit. We're so excited. We're like, hell yeah, man, that was a great job. And then we realized, like, damn it, we're being recorded. Like, man. And so we're like, and we brought the tape back because we were the first guys to have an engagement in the unit. And we bring the tape back, and I remember my squadron commander looking at me like, hey, man, you got to clean it up in the cockpit. You got to act like you've been there before. I'm like, I haven't been here before. I was like, it was pretty awesome,
Yeah.
Like we're having a great old time, because the guy who was in the backseat, he had been a Chinook crew chief before he became a warrant officer. So, I mean, he was great to fly with Richie Davis. And, but yeah, so there was that. But I think that's why. So when we look at the tape later, maybe like, yeah, all right, if somebody gets hurt, like in the end, like I take accountability for any missile that leaves my rail or any ordnance that leaves my aircraft. And getting somebody's initials sure as hell ain't gonna make me feel any better about it if I hurt somebody.
Yeah.
But while we were there, the other cool engagement we had in the 82nd actually was the benefit of it. We were out actually, because I spent so much time in other organizations. The one thing I never got in aviation up to that point was an air medal, which is like a Bronze Star equivalent, whatever. Medals don't matter, but it was one of those things. Like, I'd wear my uniform. They're like, I have an air medal. I'm like, no, man. Like, I've done some other cool stuff, but So we're out flying one day, and I noticed this truck. It was Mad Max vehicle is what we called them. You know, the built up V-bids where they would just cut out a little thing where they could see out of it because they didn't care. They were going to go kill somebody. And this V-bid looked like it was looking for a target. And I don't know what it was looking for, but I saw it and I was like, man, that's a V-bid. And I talked to the JTAC and he's like, hey, he was going to give me a 9-line. And I was like, dude, I don't have time for a 9-line. Like, we'll clean this up on the backside. I got to engage this thing. So I threw a missile up in the air, and then it was about a minute time of flight again. So, you know, I'm trying to keep the missile on and this thing's hauling ass. And so it takes a turn. I was like, oh no. And it's the 9th Iraqi Army Division headquarters. And this thing's going to go blow it up. And who's in there? I didn't know it, but I think Downing was in there. A bunch of other people were in there. And I was like, oh man. And I'm just praying. I'm like, please get this. Come on. I'm watching the time tick down. And this they had a BMP there, an Iraqi Army BMP, and it took a shot at this V-bin because it was so up armored that I just saw the shot just bounce off of it. And I was like, oh man. And as soon as the shot bounced off of it, my missile came down, hit it, and blew it up. And I was like, man, like, I hope everybody's okay. And then we just moved on to whatever was next. Well, that night I get a call, and I'm sitting at my desk in the talk, and I get a phone call, and it's somebody from 2nd Brigade, and they're like, hey, we're looking for the guys that had this engagement today. And I was like, well, that's me. I was the XO at the time. And I'm like, that was actually me. And he's like, oh, he's like, great. He's like, well, you know, somebody wants to talk to you. And I was like, all right. And it was the brigade commander, and he had the 9th Iraqi Army Division commander with him. He's like, hey, just to let you know, that was us. Like that thing was going to, we'd all been dead. And I was like, man, that's awesome. And, you know, it's just really cool that I knew the people that I helped. I didn't know it at the time, but you know, I ended up getting an air medal for that engagement, for doing that. And it wasn't even probably the coolest thing I did the entire time I was there, but it was good to get that, you know?
Yeah. You probably don't see a lot of that feedback from.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. You know, we often say there's what we call an FEB, which is a flight evaluation board, which is what happens when you screw up in aviation and they're going to take your wings. There's often a fine line between a flight evaluation board and a distinguished flying cross or an air medal. And chances are you probably did something that would probably warrant that flight evaluation board. But when the ground guys come in and say, hey, like, man, this dude saved us today, the conversation, the whole tone of the conversation changes. And they're like, oh yeah, no, good job. You know, I'm like, that's good. But yeah, so we ended up in Syria. They were doing an offensive to retake Raqqa. So we ended up there with some of our Tier 1 Special Operations brothers up there. We lived on well, it's open source now where we live, but it was an old cement factory, which no longer exists anymore. It's bombed off the face of the earth. But we lived there. It was we handpicked who was going to go. It was prior Special Operations experience guys because it was all civilian clothes while we were up there. The only time you wore a uniform was when you flew, and you wore sterilized uniform, so combat shirt and bottoms, and you also had to be fit enough to wear a combat shirt, which sometimes in aviation doesn't always happen. But you know, we went up there, and actually the folks from the Tier 1 unit that were there were a couple of the guys we had worked with in Falcon. So when I walked in, I saw familiar faces, and they saw me, and they're like, "Oh man, like, what are you doing now?" I'm like, "I just flew this Apache up." And they're like, "Oh, that's so awesome." So, you know, had some great missions up there. You know, and the rules of engagement were a little bit different. You know, we were working with multinational special operations up there. So some Brits, Aussies, Kiwis, Danes. And so, you know, when you went out to talk, you know, to go out on a mission, you never knew who you were going to get, French as well. And so we had a great experience up there, and we really turned the tide. And, you know, when we went back to it, you know, one of the cool ones that happened there was we noticed that it was another V-bid that was coming at an organization, one of the multinational Tier 1 units. And the guy came up on the net. He's like, "Hey," he's like, "where are you guys from?" I'm like, "Well, we're over there with you on the cement factory." He's like, "All right, we're coming back in for a refit in 3 days. Why don't you, we want to talk to you." And I was like, "Okay, like, come on down, man. You can sit in the helicopter, check it out, check out the sites, whatever you want to do." So they just came over during the middle of the night one night, and one of the lieutenants was there. He's a very scared lieutenant. He came around the corner and found me. He's like, "Sir, there's somebody here looking for you." I was like, "All right." So I go over, and it was you know, one of the multinational special ops units, and he's like, hey, somebody wants to meet you. And we went over to their little bonfire. They were under a different set of general order number 1 rules. So they were enjoying themselves, and as they should, because they didn't have that same, restriction we had. And so
it was like that for Task Force Falcon with the Navy DoD guys and stuff. Come over to our compound. I was like, I know what's going on with your compound.
Oh yeah. And so I hung out with them for the night, brought a couple of my warrants that were on the flight with me, and they kind of told me the story from the ground side, which was like, hey, if you hadn't shot that one, it was a particularly tricky shot too, but we ended up, killing the V-bid that was coming toward them. They're like, yeah, there were 8 of us, and we'd have been done, we'd have been dead. And they actually presented me, their squadron commander actually signed the back of their unit plaque that they had and gave it to me, which I still have. So I knew how much that meant, having worked with those units before. I think some of my warrants were like, oh, cool, some guy gave us a plaque. I'm like, no, you have no idea. Like, nobody gives out their unit colors. Yeah. Similar to when we were in Falcon, that our headquarters gave us their colors as well. And so,
Keith, is there like a, working with 2nd Brigade and then working with that unit in Syria, like was the flexibility more? Was it the rules of it? I don't know. I mean, was it?
It was honestly it was about the same.
Yeah.
So when we got briefed on ROE, when we got into theater, especially once they changed the tactical directive, the ROE it wasn't loose. It was still, what we need to do. But at the same time, it was like, hey, we trust you to make the right decision, which I think a lot of times, during the mid 2010s and stuff in Afghanistan, people were always really worried about ROE, and we got told pretty much, hey, anybody good is out of Mosul. So, if you see something and you can identify, hostile intent, like, take the shot. And so when we got up to Iraq, up to Syria, the only difference really there was because of the organization we were working for. One, how those organizations work. They trust. They have an inherent level of trust until they don't. Until you violate that trust, and that's why I selected the pilots and the enlisted soldiers to go up there to make sure we didn't do that. But I think overall, working for those guys up there, they were willing to take a little more risk. When they would clear us hot on a target, clear us in on something. And if we gave them a spot report, they generally trusted that we were seeing what we saw. The funny story talk about being trusted, we were down at Kiara West. We had a FARP down there and some folks south of Mosul. And we were taking rocket fire every once in a while. ISIS had just been booted out of there. And so we were taking some harassing fire, and then one day we were taking some pretty well aimed, pretty large rockets. And so, to the credit of our enlisted crew chiefs, instead they were so sick of getting rocketed, and a couple of the pilots had said, "Hey, the next time this happens, we're getting in the aircraft. We're going to go find these guys." And so while we're still taking rocket fire, the enlisted crew chiefs are out there getting the aircraft ready to go. The pilots run out there, get in the aircraft, take off while we're still taking rocket fire, and they get up. And the gun tape is great from it, because they're coming in and they're like, oh my God, what is that? And it was a BM-21, like target identification out of the Cold War. There's this BM-21 sitting there and it's shooting. Damn. And they're like, we see it, we got it. And I think the guys that were in there heard the helicopters coming. So we see them get out of the BM-21, they stop shooting and they're running away. And the pilots were great. They were so nonchalant about it. They're like, yep, got a BM-21. Yep, still got rockets in it, missile away, and boom, they hit it, goes up like a Christmas tree. And we give the report that night up to 2nd Brigade, up to Colonel Works Brigade, and we're doing our BDA roll-up. And in the BDA roll-up was 1 times BM-21. And their S2 called down, and he's like, what are you talking about? It's not a BM-21. And I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, it's a BM-21. And he was like, no. And I had these imagery analysts with us that were part of our task force. And I was like, do me a slide and show me why that's a BM-21, because I know it's a BM-21. These guys took it personally that somebody higher was telling them that this was not a BM-21. So they went in, they did all the imagery GWiz analysis they did, and I sent it to 2nd Brigade. They were down in Baghdad, I think, at the time. And I sent it to them, and they called me back. They're like, yeah, that was a BM-21. I'm like, dude, I told you. Like,
do you guys
do this for a living?
Do you guys got to do vehicle recognition? Do you guys
absolutely.
You have to
Yeah,
like remember,
it's
like
it's
go through whatever.
yeah, it's part of our annual gunnery.
Yeah.
So part of we do a gunnery skills test. Gunnery skill test for us, similar to like when you're doing unstable gunnery and like a Humvee or something like that. We have a GST as well. Our GST is pretty intense. I've done a ground GST before, and then I got in aviation. I was like, man, this is hard.
Mhm.
You got to explain how the 30 millimeter cannon works, how the rockets, the how you tell you this is a lot to it. And then the second part of that is vehicle identification, and it's you get 10 seconds, they pop it up there, and you got to be able to, for us, you got to be able to identify it, nomenclature, max effective range of weapon systems.
God, dog.
Yeah, it's tough. And you get 10 seconds to look at it.
Yeah.
And so, we get really, really good at that. And that's why when Second Brigade was like, no, that wasn't, I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, I've been staring at BM-21s on slides since I was a second lieutenant. I've never seen one. And man, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Like, this really happened, and then, like I said, but it was odd because we were supporting the Iraqi army. So sometimes I'd call out, they'd be doing a convoy, and I'd be like, all right, send convoy composition. They're like 2 times BM-21s, 2 times BRDMs, 3 Abrams tanks. I'm like, whoa, this is confusing.
I mean, that's got to be tough too, because,
Yeah.
like, I mean, I think ISIS took all kind of shit. Like,
They
how do
did.
you know who's?
They did.
Wait,
It was
you said
tough.
you shot the M1 Abrams. Like, how do you
Yeah,
know?
popped the turret right off of it. But it was,
Really? The turret flew off it? That's
oh
crazy.
yeah, we did that. We had a couple of shots at those, shot some BMPs, shot some BRDMs. It was a Wild West a little bit. It was funny because some people only get to go to one Wild West deployment, while they're in the Army. And I'd say your initial push into Baghdad, it was probably pretty Wild West.
Yeah.
And then you got to do Task Force Falcon, which was pretty Wild West. And so it was funny. We were shooting every day and doing these great things for the Army. And I remember I was flying with a junior warrant officer. I was piloting command of the aircraft. I was in the back, and we were en route to an engagement in Syria. And he was in the front seat, and he's like, "Sir," he's like, "I got a question for you." I was like, "Yeah, what's up, man?" And he's like, "Is every deployment this cool?" I'm like, "No." I was like, I promise you it's not. Like, this is probably the coolest thing you're ever going to do. And it was funny because we had some guys that had a quick turnaround. They PCS somewhere else, and they were back in Iraq at the same place we were at, but like a year later. And they're like, "So we're not doing anything. Like, we just sit on the fob all day and wait for something to happen, and nothing ever happens." I was like, "You were just lucky to be there at that time." And that deployment, much like the TFF deployment, really made some people's careers. I mean, I don't think I would be where I'm at if I wasn't fortunate enough, and it's just dumb luck, right? That you end up in that unit at that time. But I don't think I'd be where I'm at either had I not done that 16-17 deployment and, done the great things that we did as an organization. We ended up the Aviation Unit of the Year by the Army, named us the Aviation Unit of the Year, and, all the stuff that goes along with that. So, it ended up being a really good thing. I didn't know it at the time, and I certainly didn't do it because of it, but I was fortunate to be there during that time. So,
yeah. I mean, you guys, I know you don't want to use like unsung heroes, man. I know you're humble about that stuff, but like, it's just incredible what you guys do to save lives, man. Like, I'll tell you, you guys are a pretty small community. I don't know if you know these guys, but just off topic. But me and Chris are trying to get the Apache pilots that flew Why Not? At the Why Not mission. So we're trying to get those guys on too.
Let me ask, because I think I know at least one. I think he's retired, but
yeah.
I think I know. Let me
Chris
ask.
Chris knows Chris got contact with him.
Oh, okay, good.
I just, them going in there and doing that got to do for those guys, and you guys know what you have to do to save lives. It's incredible, man. So just want to get those Apache pilots a shout out.
Yeah,
everybody.
I mean, we're super lucky, and in aviation in general. I mean, the other story I have from that deployment was the one where I almost got fired. I was the S3 at the time, and my commander was in Syria. My brigade commander was a National Guard brigade commander in Kuwait. So I was pretty much, the adult in the room, which is scary. But they left me home alone to run the squadron, and we got a medevac call. And there's a guy named Kirk Spradley. He's call sign Tadpole. He's a great dude. And he actually was on a podcast not that long ago. I don't know which one, but he told this story, and he's like, "Oh, sir, I hope I didn't get you in trouble by telling the story." I'm like, "No, man, it's fine, And so we get the medevac call. It was a Navy SEAL. It was a white soft SEAL bleeding out. This dude was no, he's actually Marsoft. Sorry, he's a Marine. Marsoft guy that was working with the SEALs, and he was going to bleed out. And it was bad. And we had a National Guard medevac there with us, who are amongst some of the greatest pilots we have reside in our National Guard, because a lot of them are civilian pilots and got out of the active duty and went on. They fly a ton. And so Kirk and his team, I called. I had about 2 minutes to think about it. I was like, screw it, we're doing it. And so I called him in, and we looked at the weather. The weather was bad. And so I was like, man, what are we going to do? And so I took about a minute to think of it. I was like, hey, you good? You good? I looked at the pilots. There was an Apache that was going to go with him. I was like, understand, like, this isn't legal, but we're going to do it. And they said, they all looked at me in the eye and say, we got to go save this guy. I'm like, okay, I'm authorizing it. I couldn't get a hold of anybody higher than me. So I'm just going to go with it. Like, I knew I was probably putting my career on the line for that, but they went, they pulled the guy out. He lived. I've actually talked to the guy, later on, and Kirk, I didn't really think anything of it, because we were such in the mess of it at the time. I got called to the carpet on it. My squadron commander was like, man, you shouldn't have done that. I'm like, sir, it's
what else am I going to do? Dude?
It's what we get paid to do, and I've been that guy.
Yeah.
And so I ended up having to talk to the brigade commander down in Kuwait. And then the division commander called me. It was General Martin, who ended up being the vice chief of staff of the Army. And I ended up getting talked to by him. And he's like, hey, man, he's like, it's what you get paid to do. He's like, if this turned out badly, we'd be having a different conversation. He's like, sure. But you guys saved him. So, like, that's what you're supposed to do. And I went back. My squadron commander, my brigade commander was like, oh, man, like, you're done. Like, you're getting fired. And I went back. I'm like, actually, he said, good job.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, all right, well, I guess you get to keep your job then. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. And Kirk actually wrote a book not that long ago called War Junkie. He's had a very interesting career too. And he called me and he's like, hey, man, you got to buy this book. I was like, okay, like, I'll buy your book, man. You wrote it. Cool. I'll buy it. He's like, no, you're in it. I'm like, what do you mean I'm in it? In terms of find out, he told the story of what happened that day, and it left an impression on him. He was a Marine, and then he had been a special operator, and then he had been a special operations pilot. Then he worked for other government agencies, and so he had obviously been there and done that stuff. And for me to leave an impression on somebody like that, I was like, yeah, all right, cool. And he still tells that story to this day. And he's like, I hope I don't get you in trouble. I'm like, I think I'm past the term limits on that one, so I don't think anybody's gonna get me in trouble anymore. But
it's good leadership.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'm a major. I think I was at my 20-year mark, so I'm like, what's the worst they're gonna do? Bend my dog tags in half and send me to Iraq? I'm already here, so might as well do the right thing, and hope for the best. And I had trust in the pilots. I had trust in the people. I sat down and said, what you're going out there to do. You know what the risks are. There's 500-foot ceilings and you can only see about a half mile in front of you, but there's people out there that need us. And the medevac guys, I mean, they don't even, the medevac, you talk about unsung heroes is our medevac pilots. And they don't think twice. And most of the time we're grabbing them by the collar and pulling them back going, no, you can't do that.
Keith, I think they landed in a basketball court for us one time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
I remember.
I remember
it was
that.
tight. I was like, Jesus.
Yep.
But yeah,
I can remember actually the other Falcon one I had was I went out on op with you guys. We were going into Mosul, and I remember looking at the LZs, and I was like, man, like these are tight. But it was two CW5 with Vietnam experience Chinook pilots that were going to fly the mission. They were National Guard guys. And I was like, what do you think of this LZ? And they're like, yeah, it's tight, sir, but we can do it. I'm like, okay. And I remember I was coming off the back of the Chinook with you guys. And I don't remember which group when I went out with, but I was going out because we were going to do a follow-on mission. They wanted me to be there to plan the follow-on. And I was like, all right. So I'm with Davidson and we're running off the back of the Chinook. And I'm like, man, all right. And I'm getting out and I ran like, I'm going to run out of the back of this aircraft and I'm going to, it's a Chinook. So you can't do a 3-step drop. You got to keep going. And so I couldn't see anything because there's dust everywhere. It's middle of the night. And I run off the back of the Chinook and I take about 10 steps and I run smack into a wall and I fall down. Everybody's laughing at me. I'm like turtling, trying to get back up with all my gear on. And I look up, and we are in a walled compound with the Chinook blades going over the top of this walled compound. And I was like, man, what are we doing? And I remember doing the AR with the aviators, and I was like, guys, we are never doing that again. And they're like, nah, sir, we were fine. I was like, no, that's not fine. Like
they were cool, man, because I'd be on the headset and I'm like, can I get a pedal turn so I can face the ramp towards the objective? Some guys wouldn't do that, but they're like, fuck yeah, whatever you want.
Oh, yeah.
Turn it around.
Yeah, no, they were great, and they were so exact about stuff with you guys. Like when we had the azimuth of landing down and stuff like that, whatever heading they were going to land at, we always wanted to make sure we were taking care of you guys, especially if it was going to be a quick hit target. Like make sure we're putting you in the best position we can, down to that little technical stuff that can truly matter. That people don't really think about, and you guys, it's important to you. And they were so responsive. That National Guard unit that supported us on that mission was so responsive, and we made them feel like part of the team. I mean, Colonel Davidson always invited them to everything and made sure they were, with us. But I mean, that's one of the little known things. We had an entire General Sport Aviation battalion assigned to Task Force Falcon. Like they were our personal helicopter battalion pretty much the entire time. And they were just absolutely incredible.
Some got shot up, but
they did. But they also got to do some really cool stuff too. I mean, they were, we were teaching their air mission commanders how to call for AC-130 fire to help prep the LZs, and they're in the Alabama National Guard. They're never going to get to do this again, and they never did. I still talk to some of the pilots that were on that mission. They're like, man, that was the coolest year of my life. Like I can't believe I got to do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
So you were in Syria. Where'd you go after Syria?
We got done with that. I ended up, so I was fortunate enough to get selected to be the Brigade S3. So I moved up to be the 16th Cab S3, which is the aviation brigade for 7th Infantry Division out of JBLM. Did that for 18 months. That is a long time to be a Brigade S3. I can tell you that much. That is way too long. I don't know
how you could do that.
Yeah, but I had a great commander, a guy named, he's a general. He's a brigadier general now, Matt Brayman, who's a lifelong 160th guy. So we got along really well there. Doing that mission out there, the thing about JBLM is they are stuck between the Pacific Command and like Forces Command, or Western Hemisphere Command as it's called now. And so we get a lot of taskings to do a lot of things. I thought like JBLM, I'll get to go take a knee. Like they don't even work for a division. And I got out there, I was deployed or TDY more than any other place I'd ever been to. We had a battalion in Alaska. So I go to Alaska, work with them. Got to go to Hawaii, Korea, all over the Pacific, because we do the Pacific Pathways missions where, we're out there in the Philippines and Australia and everything else. So, really great experience out there. And, going back to my special operations ties, I was looking for a job after brigade time, and I got told by branch, like as they will do, hey, you're going to have all these choices when you get out, out of the Brigade 3 job. It's a great job, and you'll get repaid for your time there. And I got the list of jobs, and there were no good jobs on there. I wanted to go back to the East Coast.
Yeah, I think you guys got it worse than us. What I'm hearing, like Chris and you guys talk about your branch, man. No offense to any branch manager.
No, it was bad. I looked at the list, and all I asked for, I asked to go to the Pentagon, which I never want to work. I've 33 years in the Army. I've never worked a day in the Pentagon. Yeah. But I said, hey, I'll take a job in the Pentagon. Like I will go there. I want to go back to the East Coast. I haven't been on the East Coast in years, and there was nothing. And I was sitting at my desk, and I got a phone call. And it was from a guy I had worked with a couple of times in my career in Syria and a couple other places. And he's like, hey, man, he's like, I hear you're looking for a job. I was like, yeah, I am looking for a job. He's like, well, I got a job for you. And he's like, but you got to come assess for it. And I was like, okay, what does the unit do? And he's like, can't really tell you. And he's like, but if you come do it, I promise you'll like it. I was like, all right, great. So Colonel Brayman at the time, lifelong JSOC guy. I was like, hey, sir. I told him the name of the unclassed name of the unit. And he was like, oh, yeah, I know what those guys do. He's like, but I don't want to get into it. I'm like, all right, cool, great. I have no idea what I'm going to do. So I went, did the assessment. It was a week-long assessment, mental and physical assessment. And then got word about a month later, hey, we want to offer you a position. So the unclassed name of the unit's called Joint Interagency Task Force National Capital Region. It's our Joint Special Operations Command's presence up in the National Capital Region, and they do a lot of other stuff too. But it's really small, tight knit unit. James Downing was in it, so I got there, saw a familiar face immediately, which was awesome. He's a lieutenant colonel at the time. I was still a major, but did a year as an operations officer there. So I was going back and forth between a forward special operations task force that was working a pretty cool mission. I was the J3, so the operations officer, going back and forth between forward and rear. And then after that, they offered me an opportunity. They do a really pretty intense psych assessment on you to figure out who you are.
Yeah.
One of the functions of that organization was to provide liaison officers out to the different agencies within the National Capital Region. And so I would not be a good fit for the State Department by any means. And that was very clear. But they did offer me a position at the FBI.
Nice.
So I got to the FBI. My title was I was the JSOC LNO to the FBI, but in reality, I was the senior advisor to the director on special ops and counterterrorism. And so, an aviation guy getting to do this stuff completely out of my element, but it was that typical special operations of, well, we're going to throw you in the deep end and you either figure it out or you don't. And if you don't, you can go somewhere else, go work in the Pentagon or something.
Keith, I just, man, dude, your career.
I know.
Pretty awesome.
As a aviator.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody in the Army that's done what you've done.
No, and it's goofy.
It's incredible.
It's so goofy. And, I would sit in meetings and I'm sitting there with the guy who was actually ended up the director of the FBI for a short amount of time at the beginning of the Trump administration, part 2, this current one, a guy named Brian Driscoll. He was working at Joint Terrorism Task Force New York, whereas I would go up there about once a month for a week and work in Manhattan on some overseas stuff with them. And he was a hostage rescue team guy. And so, he hooked me up with the hostage rescue team. I got a chance to go down. They have helicopters. They would take me out flying in their helicopters with the hostage rescue team. They had some Bell 505s that they fly. And it was awesome. Oh, sorry, they were flying 429s, but, great opportunity to work with those guys, get a chance to see how, most of those HRT guys are former special operators themselves. They recruit directly out of our tier 1 units. And so, and then getting the opportunity to interact with our tier 1 units across the enterprise, and really, getting to see a side of the Army that I definitely didn't know existed. I was able to knock out my joint time there, which was good. And then, my boss there is now the Undersecretary of the Army, Mike Obadal, just an amazing guy. He was my 06 boss. So when I first got there, he's an aviator as well. And I, when I first got there, you get a little bit of imposter syndrome because you're like, man, what am I doing here? I'd look around the room and be like, these dudes are all amazing. The guy that's currently the 10th group commander was in the unit with me, just amazing dudes, all, tier 1 guys. And I was forward at our forward platform, and I met Colonel Obadal, now Undersecretary Obadal, and I was like, boss, why am I here? I don't understand. I don't fit the profile. And he's like, look, man, he's like, you did good during assessment, and you talked the right way, and you're able to interact with the interagencies. So that's why I brought you here. And he's like, and also I like to talk about helicopters, and I have nobody else to talk about helicopters with. So that's why I like to have an aviator here. I was like, fair enough, sir. So, him and I would just sit down and talk about helicopters and, talk about the networks and the friends you make. I was at the National War College, and a guy from that unit was an instructor there, and he was getting promoted, and who promoted him? The Undersecretary of the Army, Mike Obadal. And I see Undersecretary Obadal there, and he's like, Keith, how are you? And I'm like, man, this is the Undersecretary of the Army. He knows my name. This is pretty cool, and not for a bad reason. And so, getting a chance to see him again, and, seeing the amazing things he's doing, he's doing a great job as Undersecretary. And I actually get a chance to interact with him quite a bit now. My boss is the commanding general at Fort Rucker, is a former tier 1 guy as well. And so he knows Colonel Obadal, or Undersecretary Obadal, very well. And so he's an aviator. He's very interested in what Army Aviation is doing, and especially in the unmanned systems and stuff like that. So he loves to come back here and talk. And so, I look forward to getting a chance to interact with him again. But just getting to talk to those people, my 206 commanders in that organization are both general officers now. or sorry,
Wow.
Mike never made general. He opted out and decided to get out and take the political route, which I'm glad he did because he's amazing at it. And then Mike Rose, General Mike Rose, who's out in, I think he's in SOCPAC now, but he was the multi-domain task force commander out in Hawaii.
Mhm.
He's a general officer now too. So, I mean, I can't say enough about, how fortunate I was to run across these people. And, it literally was just a phone call that was like, hey, you want to come work for us? We think you'd be a good fit. And it would have never happened if I hadn't been in Falcon, if I hadn't, been in Mosul in 16, 17. I was just lucky.
Yeah.
Luck will get you so far, right? You still gotta do the thing and get there. But a lot of those, I look at people that I've worked with and I've been like, man, that dude would make a great special operations guy. And they just never get the opportunity. They never get that chance. They never get that phone call. And, I'm just lucky to have built, good relationships and rapport with people to where, they'll actually pick up the phone and call me and be like, hey, we got a pretty cool job. You want it? I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. So just very lucky. Very lucky.
It's all about who you know too, man.
Yeah.
It is. That's something I didn't realize. I came across a guy when I was a lieutenant. I was a real pain in the ass, especially as an aviation guy coming from the infantry. Being a lieutenant, most of us were idiots back then anyway. And it was funny. I had a warrant officer who he had been a captain before, and he reverted, became a warrant officer, and now he's flying 58. So he's a W-2. I'm a second lieutenant. And we butted heads all the time because he couldn't get over the fact that he wasn't a captain anymore. And I was a lieutenant and I thought I knew what lieutenants did. I didn't, but I thought I did. And so I'm trying to do the right thing. We didn't get along at all. Like, we hated each other. And come to find out later, I didn't realize he did this, but he actually went back to aviation branch and was like, hey, I kind of want to be an officer again. And we were short on officers for his year group. So they're like, yeah, okay, sure. So they made him an officer again. Well, where do I come across this guy again? At the Apache course. We're both
Yeah.
And I was like, we sat down and first kind of looked at each other and like, I don't like you. I don't like you either. And finally, we're both adults at this point. So we sat down for a beer one night. I'm like, why don't we like each other? And he's like, you were kind of a dick as a lieutenant. I'm like, yeah, I was. And I was like, you're a dick as a warrant officer. He's like, yeah, I was. Well, now we're best friends. So, I mean,
Hell yeah.
yeah, and so now it's like, why did we do that? But it is as a lieutenant, and maybe not so much as a junior captain in Falcon because it was just different. But I thought I could do it all myself. I did. I was like, I can do this. I watched my lieutenants do this when I was an NCO in the infantry, and I didn't make a lot of friends. I didn't, and I'm I could kick myself for it for what I did back then, but. I figured it out. Falcon was a huge part of that. Where I was like, oh, I can build a network now. Like I know Jerry Heim. Here we are, almost 20 years later. Talking on a podcast. And,
You look the same, and I look a little older.
Yeah. Well, I'll get there. I promise. But I just I've built those relationships. And now. My S3, when I was a squadron commander, we would go out and do a lot. He was a regiment guy too that I pulled in to be my S3. Amazing officer, better major than I ever was, that's for sure. And we would go places, TDY or to meetings or something like that. And I'd always see somebody I knew. And it usually wasn't, he was an infantry guy or this guy or that guy. And he'd be like, sir, do you know everybody? And I'm like, I don't know everybody, but I've been in the Army like 30 years. Like you kind of get to know a lot of people, and But like you said, the mixed background of, being an armor guy and being, armor cav ground guy, and then working in special ops, and then working in aviation, and then working in the infantry. And you just get to know a lot of people of a lot of different diverse backgrounds. And, I will say within aviation, there's a thought like that I didn't spend enough time doing aviation stuff. The only time I've ever really been in a flying position is when I was in a key developmental slot. So S3XO, captain, platoon leader, battalion commander. But I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world because in the end, it's helped me be a better officer.
Keith, when you transferred over to your battalion to be a battalion commander, obviously 6'6" behind you, like, oh, did I just? Sorry, turn off my button. So when you got over there, did you like all this stuff, man? Like you have so much experience to get into the seat as a
Yeah.
battalion commander. Like you got these young warrant officers, you got these young officers, like your story and like the things that you could tell them. I mean, that must have been, and that's a pretty good good leadership stuff to have in your toolbox going into
Yeah,
command,
it
right?
was
Like,
it was pretty cool because what do you do, right?
yeah,
When the battalion command list comes out and the name is on it, you find out who's going to take your battalion. You study everything you can on 'em. You look at their social media and you Google them and everything else. Well, within Joint Special Operations Command, they do a really good job of identity management. So there was nothing about me on the internet at the time, and so it was funny. They knew nothing about me coming in. They were like, man, like, and I had, it's not like I was a lifelong aviator or anything. I was, but I hadn't spent a lot of time in the enterprise. So nobody really knew who I was. So I went in cold, which was kind of nice. The one thing I did, I'm not a big like awards guy and all this other stuff, but you get plaques from everywhere you go. Well, my plaques are goofy. Like I have like, my going away plaque from being a mortar NCO. Then I got my going away plaque from the FBI. They gave me a raid jacket that they put inside a thing. And then I've got a plate from the shoot house of the hostage rescue team that they gave me, and they engraved it for me. And so what I did, I put all that stuff up in my office, and it's a lot of stuff. And I did it because I wanted to show officers, especially officers, but even non-commissioned officers and warrant officers, like there's no one path to success in the military.
Yeah.
I definitely took the road less traveled, and I did okay. I mean, I made 06, so I guess I did okay, and so going in, I had a lot to draw from experience-wise that wasn't necessarily aviation focused. And when I got there, showing up to Fort Drum was surreal because the last time I had stepped foot on Fort Drum was August of 2000 when I left as a staff sergeant to go. I literally took my rank off. I had to drive to Syracuse University to raise my right hand again as a cadet and then drive home basically to Massachusetts. And so going back on there, first day I show up at Hayes Hall up at the division headquarters, and I try to stay humble. And so I saw a line for in processing and I got in it. And I'm standing there and I'm talking to some private that's going to like, 187 or something. I'm like, cool, man. I was in 187, we're just talking. And this dude whips around the corner. He's a civilian. He's like, hey, he's like, are you Colonel Benoit? I'm like, yeah, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Benoit. He's like, you're taking 6-6, right? He's like, yeah. I'm like, he's like, come with me. You don't have to stand in line. I was like, what do you mean I don't have to stand in line? He's like, you're good. And he came around the corner, did some expedited in processing thing or whatever. I'm walking out, and all the dudes are still standing in line. I'm like, sorry, like I didn't ask for that. I promise. All the infantry privates like freaking lieutenant colonels. But,
yeah.
And it was funny. I showed up so I get through division and make it down to the squadron. I did the same thing. There were 4 guys waiting in processing and at the S1 shop. And so I just got in line. And I remember my S1 was sitting there, and I heard some whispers behind the desk at the S1 shop. And I hear like, and then all of a sudden the S1 pops up. She's like, sir, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know. This is in processing line. I'm just in processing, and it was good. I got a chance to talk to some of the junior soldiers while I was in processing. And it was funny. The soldiers remembered that, like, a couple months later, like, yeah, I was in processing. The squadron commander was behind me in line. I'm like, yeah, I'm no better than anybody else. Like, what?
Keith, were you talking to your sergeant major by this point?
What's that?
Were you talking to the sergeant major by this point, or were you?
I was very lucky. My sergeant major and I did PCC together. We were fortunate to be able to line that up. He wasn't coming in until 2 months after I was coming in, but we had a chance to write. I sat down and did the whole like vision and philosophy and all that other stuff, right? And so I grabbed his name's Chris Titchener. He's absolutely great American. And so I grabbed Chris while we were at PCC over a couple beers because there's a lot of time to waste at 411 work there while you're going through that. And I was like, hey man, I was like, we're going to write this together. Like, this isn't going to be mine. This is going to be ours. And I actually phoned in my command chief or my senior warrant officer who's W4 named Cole Sisson. And I was like, Cole, I want you in on this too. Like, we're gonna write this together. Like, this is gonna be our vision, not my vision, because it's what I think is important, but it's not the important thing. And so, with Chris, it was awesome. Down to earth guy. He knew when he was getting out of the Army because he was butting up against a mandatory retirement date. So he knew this was going to be his last trip through the force. And so, can't say enough. We sat down, we came up with division of duties. Hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what you're going to do. And then we had a warrant officer because that's a whole nother, animal inside of aviation. And I said, Chris, you got all the NCO stuff. I'll bleed over when you need me to, but I'm going to get out of your lane. You got your lane, right? I was like, but when I'm, for example, when I'm racking and stacking my lieutenants, I'm coming to you, and I'm going to have you rack and stack the lieutenants too. And then we'll compare our notes with each other, because they're going to act differently around me than they're going to act differently, around you. And I want to make sure they're treating our NCOs right. And we came to that understanding together, and man, I mean, I couldn't ask for a better command sergeant major. He was just, again, aviation, much like a lot of branches, can be a mixed bag on who you get and you don't get to choose your senior non-commissioned officer, right? Yeah. But if I had to pick it all over again inside aviation, it'd be Chris, 100 times out of 100.
I'll tell you, Keith, I worked down in Honduras. I was a sergeant major down there in Honduras, and I worked with, what was it? Oh, what was
First
it? Yeah.
Yep.
And their sergeant major, man, like, I just, like, he was a great guy, but I think he was like an Apache maintenance guy or whatever.
Yeah.
But dude, like looking at the Manning part of that and looking at Manning in an aviation regiment, like control, like works, dude, it is a animal.
Oh yeah.
Like what he had to work through. There's so many different MOSs. There's so many civic certifications.
Yep.
Like, like the certification infantry battalion, you got to worry about the medics. They got to stay current, right? Maybe you got to do your live fires. You got to do all that kind of stuff. But like there's certain certifications these guys got to maintain. It was like watching him fight through that, man. I was like, holy crap, dude.
It's rough. And the hard part about our CSMs, so we talked about like NCO progression in aviation versus maybe the infantry or armor. It's pretty clear, right? In the infantry, you're a platoon sergeant. Then you move up, you probably be an ops NCO or something like that, and then maybe you're the ops sergeant major, and then a command sergeant major. But you're an 11, you're an 11 Charlie, you're an 11 Bravo. You're one of those MOSs coming up. The interesting thing about aviation is because you just talked about it, there are so many different MOSs. So you might be a mechanic, you might be a 15 Papa. 15 Papa is an aviation operations specialist. So they're the people that keep the flight records. And like when you call in on the radio, they're the people who answer. There are RTOs and stuff. You could be a 15 Quebec, which is an air traffic controller. All of those people go into 15 Zulu.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk about sometimes not setting people up for success. You're asking a guy that was an air traffic controller when he becomes an E8 or a first sergeant to then be the troop first sergeant of an air cav troop. And this guy, his whole career has been a 15 Quebec, air traffic controller. And it's like, oh man. And don't get me wrong, some of them overcome it and they knock it out of the park, but we do not set them, like you said, that was a Chinook and Black Hawk unit down there. And you're right. It was probably a former 15 Romeo. It's an Apache maintainer who made it up through the ranks, and now he's the sergeant major of this organization. He has no idea what it is. I mean, as a squadron commander of an Apache unit, my sergeant major was a Chinook crew chief. My S3 was a Chinook pilot, and my XO was a Black Hawk pilot.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and it happens that way. Now, I can tell you, I wouldn't trade those guys for anything in the world. Because they bought into the Cav mentality and they were all about it, and I actually offered my S3 after my XO after a year. We were doing some major reshuffling like we do. And my brigade commander said to me, "Say, if Dan wants to go back to the Black Hawk battalion to go back with his people, he can." So I went to Dan. I was like, "Hey man, I'd love to keep you." I was like, "But if you want to go back to the Black Hawk unit, you can." He's like, "Hell no, sir. I want to stay in the Cav." I was like, "All right, brother, you got it." And the people that can do it well, it makes them extremely multifunctional. Like they're able to plan air assaults inside of a Cav unit, and they understand Chinook and Black Hawk stuff. And my sergeant major, who had been in the first Chinooks going into Anaconda back in 2001 or 2002 after September 11th, like this guy had stories like you wouldn't believe. But he knew how to be a non-commissioned officer. He inspired. That's one thing that's lacking sometimes with some of our NCOs. Some are very, very good at it. In the infantry, I was always used to, like, especially being in the 82nd, like who's the first guy going out the door? Like it's the sergeant major or it's the commander or somebody, And so within aviation, it can be hit or miss sometimes, but I've been fortunate to work with some great ones. And Chris was one of those people. I mean, you get those, the sensing session surveys back, I can't remember what they're called, but you get the anonymous surveys and people
command
crazy
climate
stuff.
surveys.
Yeah, command climate. Thank you. And, we get those back and people can say whatever they want, and they do sometimes, don't get me wrong. But, I never saw a bad comment about him. I mean, people had every chance to take an anonymous shot on him, they not only would they now take shots, they'd be like, we need more people like Sergeant Major Titchener. Like
Yeah.
God, we would love to, if we could keep him. If I could have kept him in the Army for another 100 years, I would have, but to show you the bond we had, when I did my promotion, which I'll talk about here in a second, but I did my promotion at a baseball game, and I asked, I put out a bunch of invitations to people that I knew still lived in the Northeast, because it's a long way to travel and everything like that. But I would send some invitations out to people like, hey, I know you can't come because you live in, California now, but hey, I wanted you to have an invite because you're important, to my career and blah, blah, blah. And I sent it out to all my senior non-commissioned officer, all my first sergeants. And I will say of the people from Fort Drum, I had 2 officers come that made the drive. And one of them flew up from JRTC, love them for it. And another one drove down from Fort Drum. It was awesome. I was glad they were able to attend. Every one of my first sergeants came.
Oh, wow.
And my sergeant major. My sergeant major
That's awesome.
drove up from South Carolina. And so the picture that I have, which you may have seen, we did it as part of the pregame, and they're holding the flag. The people holding the flag are my first sergeants. And I asked them that morning, I'm like, hey, I'd really love my non-commissioned officers to have my back one more time. So if you guys will hold the flag for them, they're like, hell yes, sir, we're in, and all my first sergeants came. And I was, being a former NCO myself, I was like, man, that makes me feel like I might've done something right,
Hey, Keith, can you talk about the Army Navy flyover?
Yeah, I sure can. So I was fortunate to get to do that twice. So I did it in Philadelphia in 2022, and I did it in Gillette in 2023, where you and I got a picture together with the out there on the field. It's an interesting process. The Army just randomly selects a unit to do it. Well, the first year they randomly selected us to do it. The second year, my S3 really wanted to do it again. So he called and asked West Point, can you ask for us again? Because we did it really good last time. And they said, yeah. So, but it's such a great experience because you get the opportunity to interact with the F-18 pilots. And, I'm not a West Point grad, worked for a lot of great West Point grads. So, I'd say the fun part of it is the lead up. So we get there on Monday and the game's not till Saturday. So you get
shit.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you come down, and in first year we were at Philadelphia at the international airport. So we just parked the helicopters there. The only thing we had to do was a 1-hour rehearsal every day. And then we were free to do whatever we wanted to do. And so we would go out every night, and there's a bunch of old grads. They're out, they're all over the place during this. And I had a warrant officer who's just an amazing dude, Nick Smith, who every time we'd go into a bar that night, he would immediately find, if there was live music, he would go up. And this dude's built like an NFL quarterback. He's just this massive specimen of a human being. And he would go up and he would grab the mic and say, just so you know, we got the Army Navy flyover Army cruise here. And it was all the Army, the Army old grads. We'd never buy a beer the entire time. It was awesome. And then doing the flyover is just, it's really emotional going through it. I handpicked in every cockpit. There was a West Point graduate. So I pair them up with a senior warrant officer and then one with me. I was fortunate to be the air mission commander for both of them. And I think the funny interaction we had, and I think the superintendent was there at the time, we had an air meeting and we just done the rehearsal, and we came in kind of low over the Eagles Stadium, not dangerous low at all. But the FAA was there, and they were like, hey, what are you guys flying at? I'm like, hey, we're flying at 250 feet above the highest obstacle, which was a flagpole. Like, that's still pretty high for us, but it's low. Like, everybody should be happy. And the FAA guy was like, right in front of everybody, the generals, everybody's like, hey, I'm going to need you to fly at least 1,000 feet. And I was like, God. I just looked at him. I go, yeah, we're not going to do that. And he was just looked at me like, what? I said, we're not going to do that. And I was like, nobody's going to see us. Like, that's not the purpose of this, And then he said, well, how about 500 feet? And I just looked at him. I said, I will acknowledge the fact that you told me to fly at 500 feet. Let's just call that good. And the CG at West Point afterward, I just saw him laughing at me over in the corner at this whole interaction. He came up, he looked at me, he goes, that was awesome. He goes, that was great. I was like, hey, sir, it is what it is,
It must have been cool flying over Gillette, though.
And especially growing up there. So one of the cool things we did with Gillette, we got there on Monday for Saturday, and we were flying out of an airport called Norwood Airport, and the guy who owned the airport actually was a former Apache pilot. So hooked us up. He really took care of us. He brought pizza out for us after rehearsals and all this other stuff, and he was a really great guy. But we called the New England Recruiting Battalion in the area, because General Beagle, you know, when he was the CG, was real big on interaction with the local populace and, you know, civ mil relations. So we called the New England Recruiting Battalion. We're like, hey, we're going to be in the area. Anything we can do for you? And they're like, yeah, can you land in some high school football fields for us? I was like, yeah, I think that's legal. And so I checked with my boss,
Sure.
and he was like, yeah, go for it. And so we actually each day, and I handpicked the crews for it. I picked everybody from the New England area to do it. And so we would go out, we'd do the rehearsal in the morning, and then we'd fly in the morning. We'd fly out to a high school. The recruiters would be there. They'd run some kids through the helicopters, come see them, talk to the pilots, we'd bring our enlisted soldiers out there so they could talk to the crew chiefs about, hey, if you're thinking about the Army, like, it's a pretty cool job, you know. And then we'd take off, go grab lunch, and then in the afternoon we'd fly to another high school. And so, you know, how cool is that some kid can say, like, yeah, there was a Chinook and an Apache that landed in my high school.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the recruiters loved it. And, you know, we got some feedback back from them. They're like, man, we got like people banging down the door that want to, you know, be part of the Army now. So,
I mean, you guys set the tone, man. You know, you
Yeah.
do have march on, but when the helicopters fly over, it sets the tone for the
oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
so-
and it was timed perfectly. Especially the Gillette one was timed perfectly. You know, we came in, they released it, and we actually, the funny part is somebody released the Army team 10 seconds early, so we were supposed to go over just as they were running out. And then I looked, and I was like, I'm looking out of I've got the video of the helicopter somewhere, and I'm like, oh man, they're already coming out, and we're just coming over the lip of the stadium. But the cool part was CBS Sports, when we were in Philadelphia, we didn't get on TV at all. And because we flew over right when as the cadets were already, you know, the football team was coming out, you know, there's pictures of us, and there's a really cool shot of, there was 3 of my pilots who were backup pilots. So they hopped on the Chinook so they could actually participate in the flyover. And they're just sitting on the tailgate of the Chinook, dangling their feet off the back, waving and taking pictures and stuff like that. So CBS Sports got that on there, and it was pretty awesome. I mean, the amount of flyovers I did, I was getting made fun of for it, because, you know, I got to do the flyover for the Hall of Fame game. We got to do a bunch of shows. Yeah, at
Well, it's
baseball in
It's
Cooperstown,
easy
New
being
York.
in 10th Mountain up there.
Yeah, in
that-
Cooperstown,
that-
New York, and at the Baseball Hall of Fame. And that morning, we didn't expect it, but we got a call. They're like, hey, we're going to hold a breakfast if you guys want to come. I'm like, awesome. And so we show up there. I was a baseball fan since I was born. And it's all these Hall of Famers. It was like Jim Rice, Ken Griffey Jr.,
Wow.
all these guys were there. And Joe Torre, I sat and had breakfast with Joe Torre, former manager of the Yankees. And I was like, I had to pinch myself, and all my pilots are looking at me like, this is the coolest thing, sir. I'm like, yeah, I'm a little kid here now too, you know. And then we got a chance to go to the Hall of Fame after we did the flyover and meet the Hall of Famers and actually get pictures with them and stuff. It was pretty awesome. It was like being a little kid, you know. And we got to do a bunch of air shows, and then, you know, as you know, we did an inverted air show over West
Yeah,
Point.
I was going to tell that story about one day, because I worked at West Point just to start this, right? So I worked at West
please.
Point. I was the BTD Sergeant Major, Brigade Tactical Department Sergeant Major. So I had to be out every day. We do drills, or do the drill, because the cadets drill every day. They have to, you know, just maintain discipline, and they have to do it for football games. So they have to do a big ceremony. So I think I saw you guys fly up the river early, whatever.
Yep.
And we were sitting there, like, just going through the commands. Cadets are doing their right shoulder or whatever, and then these Apaches come out of nowhere. Treetop level. I don't know how low you were, sir.
They're about 100 feet.
No, it was low, dude. And everybody's like stopping what they're doing. Like, what? That was the coolest. That was the cadets loving it. The cadets that are going aviation loved it. It was just a really cool moment, but it was out of nowhere. I didn't expect to see a couple Apaches fly over our head that low that morning. So it was awesome.
Yeah, we were doing that flight was we do final flight, and kind of a tradition within Army Aviation is when you're going to take your final flight, and as a battalion commander, that very well could be your final flight. You know, you may never get to fly again. And so one of my fellow battalion commanders, a guy named Josh Hayward, he's actually going to take a brigade here at Fort Rucker tomorrow morning. But it was his final flight, and he's an Apache guy, great dude. And so he wanted to fly around the Statue of Liberty. And so we're like, all right, we're in New York, let's do it. So we did. We flew down the river, right down the Hudson, and then up over the bridges, went around, did some couple laps of the Statue of Liberty. And on the way back, it was almost SOP for us. We're going to buzz West Point because look, this is an institution. We want to motivate these cadets to want to be part of Army Aviation. We want to.
That's how I saw it. That's how I saw it. I was
and
like,
so we come across, and we wanted to come in like a little stealthy, you know. So we bumped up over the west side or the south side of the campus. And as we're coming across, I'm in the back seat of the second aircraft, and I kind of sit up like this, and I look, and I was like, "Uh-oh, there's something going on here." And we were committed. It was too late, and I was like, "Well, we might as well make it look good." And it turned out it was just before graduation because I heard all about it later, but it was just before graduation. Joe McConville was getting inducted into the West Point Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it might have been that. I don't remember. I think.
And it was his induction ceremony. Of course, he's an aviator, OH-58 Delta guy himself, and so Chief Staff of the Army, retired. And so we come across, and I guess the way it went down was the reason that there was trouble was somebody thought that somebody had called us and told us to do it for General McConville. And I guess General McConville thought it was great. He was like, "Hell yeah, this is awesome." And somebody said, like, "Is that on purpose?" And then, the protocol guys were like, that wasn't.
It was not.
Yeah. So I texted one of the cadets I knew. I was like, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And of course, I didn't get an answer from him. So then I texted you. I'm like, "Hey, was that important?" You're like, "Yeah, it kind of was." But everybody loved it. And then, as I was saying before, we landed in Poughkeepsie, New York for refuel. And I called my boss and I was like, "Hey," and I couldn't even get the words out of my mouth. He goes, "So how was the West Point flyover?" I was like, "Oh man, like, yeah, that was us." And it was funny. It's 2 lieutenant colonels in the aircraft and then 2 junior warrant officers. And the warrants were scared as kids. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna get in such trouble." I'm like, "Dude, I don't think so." Like and so the I believe she's the commandant was at the time. She called up to my boss. Yeah, and was like,
she's an aviator, by the way.
She was an aviator, and she's like, "Hey, what are these guys doing?" And my boss was like, "Look, ma'am, like, technically they didn't violate any airspace rules. And if you don't want them to fly there, put out a thing to the FAA saying you don't want anybody to fly over, And
Chris, you know her, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And yeah. And so it all kind of just smoothed over. But I got back and I landed, got done, and I walked in and there was a major that it was my S3 at the time, Dan. And I walked in, he's like, "Sir, did you guys do a flyover West Point today?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Some angry sergeant major called up here." I think it was the G3 sergeant major or something, called up, and he was really, really mad. I was like,
"Yeah, I know him.
I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, it happened. I'll throw myself at the mercy."
I thought it was perfect timing, man. I thought.
And I think the funny part of it was, as I said before, it comes out on Instagram where they're doing the whole like showing the parade and everything else, and they're doing highlights and clips of it. And what clip do they use? 2 Apaches flying over the top of it. I was like, man. Like, you didn't want us to, and you were going to get us in trouble, but you had no problem using it in your public affairs,
Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah.
How many cadets you probably turned on to aviation?
Well, like I was telling you, I've run into 2 West Point graduates here that are lieutenants on hold for the Apache course. And as I talked to them and I found out they're West Pointers, anytime I found out they're a West Pointer that might have been there, I was asking them, like, "Hey, you remember that time flew 2 Apaches?" They were like, "Yeah, that was awesome. Like, man, I'll never forget that. It was so great. It was like perfectly timed." I was like, "That was me." And they were like, "Whoa, no shit, sir." So, but yeah, no, it was fun. And those of us who've been battalion commanders, I Chris as well, like, you'll never have a cooler job than being a battalion commander ever. Like, it's such a letdown after that, because it's your last opportunity. Even if I'm selected for a brigade command eventually, like, you're a brigade commander, you're upper executive, help at that point. You're just a resource, a resourcer of training and things like that, and that's fine, especially in an aviation brigade. At least an infantry brigade commander, they go to JRTC, go to NTC, maneuver their unit. Sure. As an aviation guy, you're a manager at that point. You're just coordinating things. And
do you fly at all? You don't fly at all, or no?
Yeah, you still got. I'm still, even in the job I'm in, I still have to maintain flight status. So I don't have to fly minimums, but I still have to do my flight physical, and I still get paid flight pay, which is great. But in the end, like, battalion command is really the end all be all for you as far as still getting down, still knowing every soldier's name. I knew every soldier in that squadron. Like, and being a former enlisted guy, like my door was always open. I spent my staff used to go crazy because I would never spend any time in my office. They were always trying to hunt me down to sign something or do something. I was always late for stuff. But I always told I told the majors, I'm like, look, you can run a training meeting. Like if I'm down talking to a soldier about something, I don't even care what it's about. But if I'm walking through the hangar and some specialist wants to talk to me about, his dog or something, that's more important than me sitting through a training meeting. So majors, you got the training meeting, I'll show up eventually. My sergeant major was the same way. We rarely spent time in the office as much as the staff tried to tie me to the desk. And made the opportunity, and I'll never have a cooler job than that. I know I'm okay with it. Going away and you always kind of wonder how you did and did I do a good job and everything else. And I don't know if I did or not, but in the end, like the people, I have a bunch of folks just by their career timeline. A lot of warrant officers are here as instructor pilots now, and captains are here as instructors for the career course and stuff like that. And, next Saturday I'm hosting the entire group at my house. Hey, everybody come over regardless of rank. We're going to come over, we're going to drink some beers, have some steaks, and I got a pool. Bring kids over, swim in the pool, and we'll sit down and talk about the good old days and stuff. But as I was leaving, I asked my sergeant major, because they were talking about a going away gift for me. I'm like, I really don't care. Like, whatever you guys want to do. If you do nothing, I'm cool with that too. Just give me a high five on the way out the door. I said, the one thing I'd ask that you not do is give me the colors, because it's huge and I will never have a place to put that. And so my sergeant major was like, got you, sir, no problem. And then the NCOs got all excited, and they're like, for the whole 2 weeks before my farewell, they're like, sir, you're gonna love this, what we got you. I'm like, man, I can't even imagine what this is. And they came out, we held it at a local bar that a retired warrant officer owned in Watertown called Last Call. I was out in Carthage, New York, actually. And so we were out there, and my sergeant major was like, last farewell of the night, it's gonna be the SCO. I'm like, awesome. And so they came out and they handed me these big white, like old school cavalry gloves to wear. And I was like, well, what am I wearing this for? And so finally I get there and I'm sitting through the thing and they come out and they give me a saber, and then they gave me the plaque that went with the saber. And it's a saber from 1862.
Wow.
Saber actually was carried into the Battle of Williamsburg by the 1st 6th Squadron 6th Cavalry Commander.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, man, I was almost brought to tears. I was like, can't believe it. And one of the guys, his brother does, like, they bought it pretty cheap because it was in bad condition. One of the guys, he's like, oh, my brother is my ops NCO, my ops sergeant major. His brother did like restorations. So he restored the whole thing for me back to its original, thing. And then the other guy made the plaque for me. I was like, man, this is amazing. It came from the NCOs. I was like, that's awesome. This is awesome, man. Like how can I ever repay you guys for this? And, and again, in the end, like, you always hear about, how the unit is when you leave. And, the guy that took command from me did a great job, but, you still get those guys that you come across. And being at Fort Rucker, that's the only great thing really about being here, is that I get to cross paths with everybody in Army Aviation. So all my former warrants, all my former NCOs, they come to NCO academies here. So they all come back here. And getting to see those guys again, like, oh, sir, that was awesome. And, I was talking to you about the mission we did out in Eglin Air Force Base, where we're living in mansions on the beach and
Hawaiian shirts.
Oh, yeah, I've got the Hawaiian shirt picture.
It's like a thing in aviation. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
And we got the chance to do that. And the guys all remember that stuff, and they remember, in the end, they were taken care of. They remembered that you cared. And at the battalion level, you can still show that. I think at the brigade, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you too, man. Because me and Chris, man, we are so tied to our polar bears. I'd do anything for those guys, right? Like, dealing with HKI and all that stuff. And that last deployment, we message out, we try to tell stories, but it's more than that. Like, me and Chris went into it. We were talking back and forth. We were like, hey, we're gonna do it this way. I don't know if that's how it happened at the end of it. Probably not as much, but we know, but we still look back on that battalion as like that's our family. Like there's no other privilege in the world to be a command team of like an organization, one that has a lot of history,
Yep.
two that just has badass soldiers in it, and NCOs and
Yep.
officers, and not really like being you don't have to like be in their ass all the time. The ship
Yeah.
just runs because they're really
Yep.
good at what they do. So I don't know. I look back on it, man. I get I get a little emotional about it because it just it's one of the best times of my life, and
Absolutely.
going with
Yeah.
Chris here and doing that, it was fun. So
Yeah.
hey, if you're out there and you're in position, don't take it for granted.
It's
I'm
going to
just
be
telling
over
you.
before you know it.
Enjoy every second of it.
Yeah.
I was at West Point when I was up at the War College in DC this last year. I went up to West Point. It was a civ mil relations thing that I do with a school in Pennsylvania, and it's a woman working on her PhD who she's trying to take what we value in Army leaders and apply it to the education enterprise, and saying like, hey, there's some really good things we do in the Army that do apply and can help with leadership. And so she's doing her whole PhD on it. And one of the things she did was go to West Point, and one of my captains is a TAC up there right now, and so I linked in with him, and it was great to sit and listen to him talk because I let him run the whole thing, and I was just there to kind of walk around with him. And I was listening to him talk about like mission command and trusting and blah blah blah. And I got a chance to talk to him later. I'm like, hey man, like I don't know if I did it right, but like, did you feel trusted? He's like, sir, I've never felt more trusted in my life. Like you are not a micromanager. You let us do what we needed to do to get the mission done, as long as it was legal, moral, ethical, and we didn't flip an aircraft down.
Yeah,
like,
that's how Chris was too.
Yeah, you gave us the latitude to do it. You didn't tell us how to do it. You just told us what to do, and then came back and so to hear that from him, like that warmed my heart. That somebody who, because he had every way, he didn't work for me anymore. He could have been like, well, sir, you kind of sucked, and when you did this, it was bad. But I remember, when I was first in command, he had an incident where something happened that could have ended his career. We had a shadow UAV crash, and there was a lot of reasons why, but in the end, General Beagle actually was one of the people who I have all the respect for in the world. But he at the time was going to issue a GOMAR to this kid, which would have ended his career. And I was able to sit down with General Beagle and talk to him. And I kind of put I was like, hey, I'm 2 months into command. I'm at 24 years in the Army right now, 25 years in the Army. If it ends today, like, that's okay. Like, I lived a good life. I'll serve out my time in command and retire. And I sat down with General Beagle, being the guy that he is, and talked with him and explained to him why this was a bad idea. And in the end, he was like, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, that's good, man. There's not a lot of leaders that do that now. That sit down and that take the, stick up for their subordinates like that. So
yeah, it's easy to take the easy way. But in the end, I've always kind of looked at it. General Gill, who's the CG here at Rucker, one of his sayings here is, because we brief the incoming battalion commanders at pre-command course for the branch pre-command course here, and I always sit in with him because I'm a briefer at it. And one of the things he tells battalion brigade commanders, he's like, do this job like it's the last job you're going to do in the Army. Like, just approach it that way. And if it isn't, awesome. If it is, if you've made battalion command, you are successful. Like, there's no question. As a battalion commander, you have achieved success. And so if this is the last job you do in the Army, that's okay. So if you and that I took that to heart, and that's how I led every day. And did I come close to the edges a couple times? Sure, I did. But I had a great brigade commander who when something would go wonky, like me flying over West Point, I'd call him, I'd admit I was wrong and be like, hey, sir, we probably jacked that up. And he's like, yeah, I got you. Don't worry about it. Nobody died. You'll be fine. And, let me continue to lead. And so I was fortunate to have that. And at every key leadership position I've had commanders that trusted me and that allowed me to do the things I needed to do. So just really lucky, and coming out of command was awesome. I again was told, like, coming out of command, you're going to have all these great choices of things to do. And I was like, great. And then Branch was like, no. And so I ended up coming to Fort Rucker. So they were
God, you guys' path is just,
yeah.
The officer world is
It is.
Awesome.
God
It
almighty.
is.
Awesome.
Like I thought it was like, I'll go work in the Pentagon. Like I had good OERs and blah, blah, blah. And so like, no, you're going to go work at Fort Rucker. And there were a couple jobs open here, but one of the jobs was the director of tactics and doctrine. It was really director of tactics. I was like, well, I'm just coming out of command. It would be really good if I went down there because the person who had been here before had been at Fort Rucker for a long time, didn't have a lot of operational experience. So I just came in like a whirlwind and I was like, all right, we're gonna change some stuff. And we did. And we got some really good stuff out of that. And then I was fortunate to get selected to go to the National War College. I didn't want to go to Carlisle. I'm not anti-Army PME. I know some great people that have been through Army PME, but I wanted to do something a little different. So I called on some general officers to write me a couple of letters of recommendation, and they did. General Anderson, who's now the 18th Airborne Corps commander, was one of those people.
He's a good guy.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
And he was my division commander, obviously, for the second bit of my command. And, got a chance to go to National War College. It's joint interagency. So got a chance to work with everybody from Aussie SAS guys to, people in my homeroom. I had a dude from Liberia. He was the first Liberian to ever come to the National War College. Talk about a culture shock for that guy, coming from Liberia over to DC for a year. But got a great exposure there. Got a chance to travel to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia while I was there, Cairo, Egypt, and got a chance to talk to all the senior officials over in that area, which was amazing. And then we had to do an out brief on the back end. And being in DC, it's great because there's a lot of high-ranking people there. And we ended up briefing the National Security Council. So got to go to the White House and in my Class A uniform and brief the NSC on our findings and our strategy and things like that. And there's nothing better than when an NSC staffer who's pretty much one step between you and the executive branch, the president's going, hey, that's actually a really good idea. We hadn't thought of that. We could probably incorporate that in our strategy for the Horn of Africa. So,
Yeah.
And then the opportunity, didn't know what I was going to do coming out of there. Wanted to stay in DC. The Army had different ideas for me. And General Gill asked me to come back here to be the director of training and doctrine. So the cool part about that is the name on its face probably sounds terrible. But we're transforming. A lot of new things happen in Army Aviation. We got the new tilt rotor aircraft coming out, the MV-75 Cheyenne 2. So that's new and pretty exciting. And my team works on that. So my team develops all the training, all the leader development, all the NCO Academy, the PME, all that stuff to train a whole new series of people, and then unmanned systems as well. We're taking a lot of lessons from what we learned in Ukraine. I have folks in Ukraine right now that are over there, working alongside the Ukrainian Army, getting lessons learned so that we can do better as a branch and do better to support our ground commanders. But that was my number one message coming in. It was my message when I was here before, and it's my message now. Is it's a change in mindset, especially when I was here last time. We only have one purpose here, and that's to serve the warfighter. And if something we're doing is not serving the warfighter, not serving the customer on the ground, then there's no reason we need to be here. And so
I agree.
I have great Army civilians. About half my force here, about 100 people that work for me, and half of them are Army civilians, and they're amazing. A lot of retired warrant officers who just love doing it, and they could probably be out making a ton more money somewhere else, but they're back here working way longer hours than they should. They're supposed to work a 40-hour work week, and they'll stay at work for 60 hours a week and not claim a dime of overtime because they really believe in what they do. So
now it's Colonel Benoit.
It is.
Colonel.
It's and I was saying, I always believe every time I've had a promotion is a good reason to have a party. I actually had a guy who was a JSOC guy sat next to me a lot of times in the auditorium at the War College, and we served in JSOC together. He's an 18 series officer, and one day it was like March 30th or March 31st. We had 2 days in a row we were in uniform for some reason because we never wore uniforms up there. But it was like general officers coming in to talk to us. And so one day he came in. He was wearing the little brown coat over the Class A's, and he was wearing lieutenant colonel rank. And then the next day he came in. He was wearing colonel rank. I was like, "When did you get promoted, Mark?" He was like, "Oh yeah, I just put it on myself." I was like, all right. I mean, I guess that's one way to do it, right? But I like to have a party. So, and I like to celebrate the people that got me here, really. And it's never about the person getting promoted. It's about all the people that got you to where you're at. And so I decided back in December, I contacted the Boston Red Sox and I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this at your AAA team in Worcester. And so they're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And so what I ended up doing was renting out the entire outfield box for about $45 a ticket, invited 100 people. And I talked to them about how do you want to do this? And you know, I said, I'm fully aware this is great public affairs for you as well. And they were like, hell yeah, we're in. And so there was a great team down there at the Worcester Red Sox, the AAA team. And they were like, hey, you know, if you want to do the promotion. So I did the promotion before the game started, kind of up in the box with all of my, and I was telling you before, I had people from, I had the guy that I flew to MEPS with as an 11 Charlie in 1993, you know, on the plane, and we ended up in the same National Guard unit for a year. Still know that guy, and he came to the promotion, which was awesome. All the way up to a guy that I went to airborne school with in 2001. We've stayed friends throughout. And we ended up at the National War College graduating together 2 weeks before that. So we talk about like full spectrum. I had everybody, and so we did the promotion up in the stands. It was great. General Brayman, who's the Army's right now going to be the Army's public affairs officer here soon, aviation officer, great American. And he promoted me. And then we went onto the field as part of the pregame ceremony. I had my first sergeants and my sergeant major actually holding the flag behind me. And we did the oath of office right there on the field in front of 8,000 people. And initially, they didn't tell us they were going to give us a microphone. I thought we were just going to stand there and do it. And they looked at General Brayman and you know, he gave me the raise my right hand. So I raised my right hand and they stuck a microphone in his left hand. And he was like, he looked at me, he was like, ooh. And so he's given the oath of office over the loudspeaker. And how many times as officers do we screw that up like a little bit, you know? And so he was like, man, I looked at his face and he was like, ooh, this could be bad. But he nailed it. But we talked about it after. He's like, yep, you only have to screw it up once.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll never hear the end of it. But so we did that. And then they brought me, and then I threw out the first pitch for the game, which was great. So I can't thank the Worcester Red Sox enough for being so great to me and my family. And, you know, they brought my family out there. My mom's out there. This is my hometown. And half the people there were, you know, childhood friends of mine, and they never get to, you know, Massachusetts isn't exactly the most military town in the world. So they got the chance to actually see me in uniform, and General Brayman talked about, like, you know, I don't ever consider a promotion a big deal, but colonel's kind of a big deal, you know, and he said that, you know, like, hey, this, you may not realize this. He opened it with, cause you know, he's got to give me a hard time. There's 100 people there. He's like, I didn't know this many people liked Keith Benoit. I can't believe there's 100 people here. And I was like, thanks, sir. Appreciate it. You know, but then he was, you know, saying what a big deal it was. And, you know, I made a point to, because there's people that just came from out of town. And when I wrote my speech, you know, I kind of put it on my phone, and felt bad because I was reading off a teleprompter there, because I don't normally do that. But, you know, I made sure to mention every single person, all 100 people that showed up got, you know, some kind of shout out. Because, you know, I know it's going to be my last promotion, so you might as well have fun with it. And, you know, the team was great, and, you know, it was just an amazing day to be there and have people from every part. I managed to have somebody from every assignment, you know, come up for the promotion. So, you know, it turned out to be a great day. And then we all got together afterward. Like I said earlier, you know, it's kind of like when you mix some of your friend groups and you're like, oh man, like, you know, this friend group doesn't know anything about this guy, you know, didn't know me in this part of my life, but they know me now. And as I said before, I won't get into details on it, but mixing my ground cavalry and infantry friend groups with my aviation friend groups was eye-opening, I think, for my aviation friend groups. They're like, remember this time we were running around Missoula doing this? And I'm like, yeah, I remember the time we, you know, went to a horse corral, and unfortunately one of my specialists opened the horse corral, and we unleashed like 8 prize racehorses to run around downtown, you know, Mosul. And then one of them kicked one of my NCOs in the chest. And the guys were looking at me like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, no, I did that. Yeah, that was me. So, yeah, it was a great way to cap off, you know, my career's not over. I got to definitely do 3 years, you know, as a colonel, to retire as a colonel. I feel like I should probably do that. But
it does get harder though. I was gonna say, especially, you know, you're at that tail end, you know, you got 3 years left. You got to, you know, because I kind of hit that wall at West Point, man. I was
Yeah.
like, dude, I gotta stay focused because I know
Yep.
I'm not really doing it anymore for the promotion. I'm not doing it
No.
anymore for the OERs, the NCOERs. You know,
Nope.
it's the time kind of thing. I'm doing it more for the
Indeed.
soldiers and
Yeah.
NCOs and officers
That's it.
now. But
That's what I tell everybody is at this point, my story's written. Like I've got no more story to write. Like if I command a brigade, awesome. If I don't, I'm okay with that too. But in the end, everything I do, like the great thing about being here at Rucker is we have the lieutenants in flight school. I have the captains going through the captain's career course, and any opportunity I get to sit down with them and talk, or even with the warrant officers here, you know, talk about, hey, from a squadron commander's perspective, this is what I think you should do to be successful. I'm not saying do it. I don't have all the answers, but here's my experience, you know, and passing on it one way with you at West Point. What a great opportunity to pass on experience, you know, to our generating force, to really just pass down the lessons learned. And that's what I tell them at this point. I'm not doing this for me anymore. I'm doing this because I want to build the next generation of officers, warrant officers, non-commissioned officers that are going to come up through the ranks. I want to make sure. And every time I get you know, I get it all the time. Like, hey, sir, can you write me this letter of recommendation for this thing? Or can I use you as a reference? And the answer is always yes. I've got guys that call me from when I was a commander in 2010, 2011. Like, hey, sir, you probably don't remember me. Yeah, I do, dude. Like, yeah, I was a troop commander. There was like 40 of you. I remember all of you, you know.
yeah.
They're like, hey, I'm trying to apply for this job. And I was like, well, hey, dude, just give me the background on it. You know, write me something that, you know, give me some background I can write with. And I'll put my name on it. Like, I'll vouch for you, you know. And that's really the most rewarding part of this is the people that think enough of you to come back to you to say like, hey, I valued working for you. I valued, you know, what you brought to our team. And I'd really like it if you could put your name on something for me. In aviation, I get it all the time for warrant, you know, enlisted guy, an NCO that wants to become a warrant officer. And they're like, hey, sir, will you write a warrant officer, you know, letter of recommendation for me? Hell yeah, I'll write it. Like, you just tell me what you want me to write and I'll write it. You know, I can honestly say like maybe once in my career I've ever said no to something. And it was like, yeah, that guy probably shouldn't be in the Army anymore. So let's not.
I mean,
you know?
yeah, you got to start and I mean, you know, you got to start transitioning to that old mentor, right? Like, especially when you retire, man, and you hang it up, you're still going to get all that. You're still going to get the questions. You're still going to get, me and Chris still get the stuff on our messages, you know?
Sure.
So, I mean, it's not over for you, man. I think you're going to have like a hell of a career after the Army too.
Yeah.
So wherever that you find you, you know, so
I'm an inch deep and a mile wide on a bunch of stuff. So, you know.
Hey man, you're still in good shape. You're 33 years in. You still got your knees, you know. Like you're still.
I know. It's hard to believe. My back, on the other hand, like, but you know, all that jumping out of airplanes. I only had one bad jump accident, and I managed to survive that. So, you know, I'm lucky on that respect. And I was still jumping out of airplanes at 49 years old. I mean, I was at JSOC when I was still on jump status in DC. I was driving down to. You know, I was definitely the oldest guy, and I hadn't jumped in like 8 years or something. I remember going out for my first jump and having to jump an MC6, which I didn't know anything about at the time. I was like, well, this is a new parachute, and wow, this is a lot better than what we were jumping in the 87.
You're not dope on a rope, man.
So, you know, I got out there and jumped, and I didn't have to. When I was in that JSOC unit, it was optional to be on jump status, but my thought was like, you know, I wasn't in uniform a lot. I was in civilian clothes most of the time. But when I'm in uniform, wearing a maroon beret, and I wear a patch that has airborne over the top of it, like I'm going to jump out of airplanes. Like that's not the right thing not to. And but you know, fortunately, most of my body has survived. You know, but it is what it is, and you know, I'm just lucky and fortunate. I mean, I often say like I have like you talk about being an old mentor. I have. You know, obviously, my friends all their kids are getting up around high school age and getting ready to go to college, and I have friends all the time that reach out to me like, hey, you know, will you talk to so-and-so about the Army? And I'm like, hell yeah, I'll talk to him about the Army. I was like, what story you want me to, like, what's your position on it before I go into this? I was like, because if you want me to tell a bad story, I'll be honest about the good and the bad. But in the end, like, I've been in the Army 33 years. I've made it to 06. I've jumped out of an airplane 47 times. I've visited, you know, 17 different countries. I've got an undergrad and 3 master's degrees that I've never paid for. You know, I know how to fly 5 different helicopters. So like the Army's been good to me.
Yeah.
And I'm always honest with people when, you know, about the good and the bad. When I talk to civilians about it, I'm like, sure, there's bad things about the Army. there's bad people in the Army. Unfortunately, we don't catch them all. And the
Sure.
best thing we can do as commanders is just crush it and then, move on to set that example for our soldiers. But in the end, like, that's the story I'm going to tell them. And
Yeah.
if you don't want them to join, I'm probably not the right guy to talk to.
Yeah.
You know,
There are also bad veterans out there too.
oh yeah.
So you gotta fight through the noise of like
Yep.
telling the good and the bad, and
Yep.
keeping them informed. But
Yeah. But that's my story, man. And like I said, I feel lucky to be able to get up and put the uniform on every day. I just got promoted a month ago, so I'll be honest, I just get super confused when lieutenant colonels try to salute me. When I'm walking around Rucker, I still think they're like, I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, then I look at them like, oh man, you're a colonel now. That's crazy. And I think it's this. Yeah, when I was home, it sounds kind of sentimental, but I was getting ready to go to my promotion, and I was staying at my mom's house. It's the house I grew up in, and I was getting ready in the mirror. Putting my uniform on and stuff like that and making sure it was straight. And, I was like, man, this is the same mirror I looked in like the night before I left to go to basic training as an E1. Like, this is the same mirror I looked in. And now I'm looking down and my God, like, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, because Keith, someday, man, like, I've been retired for a year and a little change now, but that uniform's going to go in the closet.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, when you wear it, I say, don't take it for granted, man.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I value every day I get to do it.
Yeah, because I
try to-
open up my closet every day to go to work. My
Yeah.
uniform's sitting right there, and
Yeah.
it's just like, fuck, I'll never wear that again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's
But-
crazy.
all
Yeah,
right.
so that's my story.
It was an incredible story, by the way.
Yeah.
I appreciate
I had a really
Yeah.
really good time on this one. This was man. As an aviator, I just can't. I mean, I think you've been there, done it. That's like a literal term for you, man.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'll say a couple words real quick. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you kind of want to put out, or anything
No,
else you wanna talk?
I'm good, man. I feel like I've talked too much. So
No, again, man, I just want to tell you, Keith, thank you so much. It is for coming on here and spending a couple hours with me and Chris, and
Sure.
just letting us listen to an amazing story that I hope some of the Task Force Falcon guys. I'm going to kind of sell this a little bit because we haven't.
Yeah.
You're actually the first Task Force Falcon guy we had on here, so like we haven't been able to tell the story. I've been reaching out to some of the guys. Some of the guys aren't ready to tell the story. Or
Yeah.
there's paperwork that still is getting processed.
Sure.
Or, site presidential unit citation
Yep.
stuff, or all these kind of things. But
Yep.
I appreciate you being the first one and coming on here. And
Yeah.
I'll put out, we'll clip the mud story because I think
Yeah.
a lot of the boys and girls that were in that organization will love that one. But yeah, I appreciate it for coming on here and spend some time. It's good seeing you, man.
Yeah,
I'm
you as
glad,
well.
I'm glad you're doing really well, dude.
Thank you. I
we got- we
appreciate
just-
it. And thanks for what you two do as far as, getting people on. I've listened to every episode you got, and, it's great to get the stories out there and really let some of our veterans, especially, I'm old at this point, but not quite a veteran yet. But getting people out there to tell their story and so people can see the real side of the Army, because the media and things like that unfortunately don't always tell all the sides of it. So it's good for people to hear the leadership lessons and the things we've gone through, and you and I have gone through together, and hearing about the relationships that we build and why that's important. So I appreciate what you guys do as well.
It's all connections, man. Got to stay connection. Just because I always say this, Keith, but just because you hang up the uniform doesn't mean it's over.
No,
Like
absolutely not.
I still tie in. Like I talk to Chris. I talk to Chris every day. He
Every
texts me
day.
17 times a day, right? So, but
Hey,
yeah,
believe it or not, it's not even stupid reels.
No, I couldn't, like, just the relationship I have with this guy up here is amazing. I'm glad we're carrying this on and being able to give a foundation to tell stories and stay connected and stuff like that. But yeah, it's great. But I'll turn it over to Chris, man. If anything you want to put out at the end to close this out.
Yeah, no. Hey, again, for everybody that's made it this far, hit that like and subscribe button, please, for us. Okay, that helps us out. And make sure you comment. Jerry loves to read those comments, so make sure you're commenting on everything for us. Hey, Keith, I can't thank you enough for coming on. That was a hell of a story. From an infantry perspective, I've got a bit of a meandering path as well, if you will. But you put mine to
Sure.
shame, brother. You put mine to shame. That was amazing. And good on you. Congratulations
Thank you.
again on your promotion to colonel. Well deserved. And hopefully the powers that be are smart enough to give you that brigade command somewhere, and you can keep on serving.
I
But
appreciate
yeah,
it.
I'll leave the final words to you, brother.
Well, hey, again, thanks again for having me, and it's been an honor. And I look forward to continuing to serve. And if I can ever be of any help for anybody out there, I'm down here at Fort Rucker. So if you ever come through, please say hi.
We need an editor. I was just joking. Okay. All right, guys. Hey, it has been a great one. We appreciate everybody's support. Like Chris says, please subscribe on all socials, and just give us some love, because we're not really doing this for ourselves. We're doing it for everybody out there to continue this going, and we just need your support for that to happen. So, thank you guys all, and we'll see you later. Peace.